Hello and welcome to Babble Scribbler, the random podcasty show where we talk about whatever the hell we want. My name is Scribbler. I do horse voices on the internet. I am joined today by Goombasa.
Hello, it's very hot in here.
Midori.
Yes, there's a Midori in here.
And making their podcast debuts, Panda.
Hey, it's an idiot on the internet.
And Johnny Furno.
Hello! Normally I'm in front of a camera, so yeah, new format. Hi.
Panda is one of our artists and also one of the main characters from this year's Aprilverse. You may have seen Small Cute Demonic Pony. And Johnny often goes by Johnny Fireflame and does reaction videos and has reacted to Aprilverse. So we've got a bit of a theme going through this year with this podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about movie adaptations of books. And we should have all brought an example with us that we want to talk about as a group. Are we all good for this?
Yeah, I think so.
I have two.
I have scrambled some together.
Yeah, because you wanted to do a bunch of Danish films that none of the rest of us had heard of.
I decided against it since I realized that it would probably be a bad idea, like lost in translation and everything.
Puss! No, don't shut my laptop!
What did she say?
Wait, what?
Her cat almost shut her laptop.
He
Attack of
rolled
the
over.
Paws.
He rolled over and nearly shut the laptop on me. He's laying behind the laptop
When
and
good
trying to
cats
get
go
close
bad.
to it to get the warmth on his belly. And then when he rolled over, it nearly shut on me.
I guess that the cat is asking for paws.
You're right, baby. What are you
So, does this mean Pusscat gets his debut too?
doing? Pusscat has been a fixture of a lot of podcasts, haven't you, sweetheart? Yeah. For some reason, he's decided he wants to sleep on the table today. Yeah. And he wants scritchies. You're not feeling so well, baby. Oh. Right. So, yes, we're talking about moody adaptations of books, apparently. We're going to go down the list. Each of us will suggest one. The rest of us will have a chitter-chat about what we think and whether or not we agree. And just, as is always the case with these podcasts, randomly go on tangents that usually involve penises. We have a theme. So, Goombasa, do you want to lead us off with your choice?
Originally, I was thinking about talking about The Lord of the Rings, but one that's a pretty big topic and one that's probably been talked to about to death. And then I thought, well, why not do Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings?
Oh.
But then I decided, you know what, I'm going to choose a good adaptation. So I decided to go with The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle.
Oh. So, what are your thoughts on this then? Do you want to give like a brief rundown of the story and the adaptation itself, so that those listening have a rough idea if they've not seen it?
Sure. The story of The Last Unicorn follows the last unicorn, who finds out from a couple of humans who enter her forest one day that she is, in fact, the last of her kind, something that she was totally unaware of. And so, after being prodded on by a philosophical butterfly, it makes sense in context, she ends up going on a journey to try and figure out what happened to the rest of the unicorns. And during that quest, she is joined by Schmendrick the Magician, Molly Grew, an old bandit woman, and they eventually find their way to the lair of the Red Bull and King Haggard, who is using the Red Bull to keep all the other unicorns trapped in the sea, so that he can look at them, because they're the only things that make him happy. During that time, the unicorn ends up being turned into a woman to sort of defend herself from the Red Bull, who is only interested in chasing unicorns. It ends with them trying to figure out how to defeat the Red Bull so that they can get all the unicorns to come out of the sea. And I think that the movie is probably one of the best adaptations of a book I have ever seen before.
Well, it helped that Peter S. Beagle wrote the screenplay.
Yes, and it also helped that a lot of the actors who were in the movie were also very passionate about keeping the themes and integrity of the movie intact. For example, Christopher Lee, who plays King Haggard, really, Christopher Lee playing a villain that's so unlike him, he bought a copy of the book to prepare for the role. And apparently, he read it and he loved it so much that not only did he become a very close friend to Peter Beagle for the rest of his life, he also walked into the studio on the day he was set to record with his own personal copy of the book with scenes underlined that he insisted be kept in the movie, which also included King Haggard's motive rant, which would have been cut from the movie if he had not said, keep this in.
Wow. Did not know that. I know that Angela Lansbury was in it. She was the witch, wasn't she?
Right.
Madame Fortuna, that was it.
Madame Fortuna, yes.
Because I remember watching that scene as a child and thinking, what is Jessica doing in that for Murder, She Wrote?
Yep, they got a lot of pretty big name actors to play most of the parts in that movie. Like I said, Christopher Lee plays the villain and whatnot, and it's all done amazingly well.
Am I right in thinking it was animated by a Japanese studio in the 70s?
It was produced by Rankin Bass, who are most well known in America for churning out those Christmas stop motion animation pictures in the 60s, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and The Year Without a Santa Claus and whatnot. They were also responsible for a couple of Lord of the Rings adaptations as well, like they did an animated version of The Hobbit. But their fully animated films were done by a Japanese studio called Topcraft, members of which would go on to become founding members of Studio Ghibli.
Oh, that explains a lot about that design
It
in Last
does,
Unicorn.
yes.
See, I grew up with the soundtrack for that because my mum was a big fan of the band America, and I know they did the song The Last Unicorn and composed a lot of the score.
Which, by the way, the score in that movie is also brilliant. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's such a good adaptation, is there is stuff from the book that is left out. Chiefly a lot of the songs and poetry, and a few of the details as well. But what it does keep is just done so well in the movie. Like, no frame of animation feels wasted. And certain scenes just feel so well animated and so well presented in the visual medium. Like the one that I always go back to, the one that I remember most from the movie whenever I think about it, is the scene with the skeleton. And in this scene, they have to get past a skeleton guard who is basically just a top half of a top torso and a skull. And he says he won't let them into the lair of the Red Bull, which is where they need to go to finish off the beast, unless they give him what he wants. And what he wants is the only thing he can remember from when he's alive, which is wine. Schmendrick, the magician, tells him that as a skeleton, why would he want wine? He can't see it, he can't taste it, he can't smell it, he can't even feel it. But the skeleton insists that he remembers what it was like to drink wine, and so he wants to relive that memory. And so essentially what Schmendrick does is he drinks a container of water and says he transformed it into wine. And they hand the empty container to the skeleton, who mimes like he's drinking and getting drunk. And he just throws it aside and goes, "Oh yes, that's wine. That is exactly how I remember it." And he lets them pass. And the way the movie presents it, it's still a very funny scene in the book, but the way the movie presents it is just perfect.
Does anybody else have any opinions on The Last Unicorn who has watched it?
You know, I actually haven't watched it. I own it and I haven't watched it. The only thing
Shame.
Don't shame me. I read a graphic novel based on it that had the entire story. Don't.
Okay, now I'm jealous.
It was actually a really good graphic novel. I don't know if the scene where the last unicorn is imprisoned in like a freak show zoo and like she frees a harpy that kills the ringleader. I don't know if that was in the book.
It was. In fact, it was very expanded in the book.
Awesome. And also in the graphic novel, when the last unicorn is transformed into a human to protect her from the bull, she ends up falling in love with like the king's son, or at least he falls in love with her, and she's just like slowly losing her memories and becoming more and more emotionless. So it's just like, oh, I guess I love this guy too. And when they change her back to normal, well, she remembers who she is and she just fucking leaves. And something that I think that they might have added to the graphic novel, I might be remembering it wrong, but I remember there being a thing about the king heard some sort of fortune that a unicorn would be the end to his reign, and that's why he had the Red Bull go out and find all the unicorns in the world and trap them in that sea so that they couldn't, hurt him.
Yep, he was the cause of his own destruction.
Actually, the reason was a lot more selfish. It might have been changed for the graphic novel, but in the movie and the book, the reason why he wants all those unicorns there is so that he can look at them. Because they make him happy. That is literally the only reason. Because he has never been happy at any point in his entire life until he saw a unicorn. It was the first time he felt joy, and the only thing that makes him happy is to have them around so that he can look at them when nobody else can.
Wow. I do remember something about in the book, wasn't there a village at the bottom of the cliffs? Oh gosh. There was something to do with the village at the bottom of the cliffs, and they were being paid off, I think, to ignore what the Christopher Lee's character was doing. Oh gosh, this is escaping me now. It's been a very long time since I read that book.
There might have been something like that. I think a few details might have gotten shuffled around, because there is like the band of thieves paying off a lot of rich people so that the rich people will ignore what the bandits are doing. That was a scene in the movie, and again, the book expands on that a little bit more. But in the movie, they basically just talk about it.
Right. Okay. Do I take it, Panda and Johnny, you haven't seen or heard of The Last Unicorn?
I have seen video clips from the movie, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. But my only true exposure to The Last Unicorn was through the cover of I guess the theme song done by
America.
No, actually done by a singer on YouTube from the group Ninja Six Party, Danny Sixbang.
Ninja
Dan
Six
Avidan.
Party, really?
Yes,
Exactly.
Dan Avidan did a beautiful cover of The Last Unicorn.
It is gorgeous. Anyone here, seriously, go watch it. Go listen to it.
Yeah, they're primarily a comedy band, but The Last Unicorn is actually his favorite movie, and when he heard it was getting a re-release, he decided to do a cover to celebrate that, and it is a gorgeous cover.
Dan Avidan is already one of my favorite singers on the internet, so I love it.
Yeah, he started doing a lot more cover music of just songs that he really enjoyed after that one, when he saw the positive reaction to it.
Yes, listen to his cover albums. They're so good.
I have seen The Last Unicorn. It's just been a hot minute, because that was the beginning of Itty Bitty Panda's horse phase that she never got out of. I
Oh.
love that movie.
And how old was Itty Bitty Panda when she watched that?
The first time, probably 5, and then just continuously. I watched it again 2017, but I have the memory of a goldfish. But I know I love it. It's good.
I love that you say that that was the beginning of Itty Bitty Panda's horse phase, as if it isn't just kind of a commonly expected thing of American little girls to be in love with horses and ponies.
Hang on, what's this about American girls? You've got an international podcast here.
I don't know what things are like in Britain.
We invented horse riding, dressage, the ponciest of horse riding.
Well, that's just the thing. Maybe out there it's a gender neutral thing.
Suppose. There is sort of the what do you call it, stereotype of the pony set, the young girls who love ponies and going horse riding and things, and that is very much a stereotype here.
Yeah, I was kind of exposed. I was actually into riding for a year, but then I quit because I was very kind of bullied out of it by some of my friends at the time who said, it's a girl sport, It's yeah.
And now you have a lot of people who win for riding in the Olympics. Go figure.
Exactly.
We now exist in 2019 when everybody looks at gender and goes, the fuck are we still doing with this shit? Right, so, if we've got no more opinions on The Last Unicorn, Panda, since you are next on the list, what movie adaptation of a book have you brought to the table?
I have brought The Host to the table.
Ooh, the Stephanie Meyer book.
My personal opinion, one of her better works that I've gotten a hold of.
So you want to give us a quick rundown of what the story is?
So basically, in this universe, these little aliens called souls have basically taken over Earth, and there is a very, very small pocket of humans resisting. Our main character has been put into one of these rebel humans' bodies because they caught one. Like, at the first, they don't get along because the body is fighting back. She's basically Melanie, who is Melody Strider, which is the human, gets basically stuck in her own head. And over the course of time, they decide to leave where they're at because the Seeker is basically trying to get Wanda or Wanderer, our main host alien, to like try to sift through Melanie's memories to get like where the other people are hiding, and even proposition to put herself into this body and then have Melanie killed off. Well, obviously Melanie didn't like that, so they go and they try to go back, which they manage. And over the course of time, at first they really didn't like her. They didn't really like the fact that one of the things that were trying to turn them were there, and it took a while, but she did eventually get along with them. And then there is a little bit of a love story in there. Things do work out in the end. There's a lot more that I'm missing, but I hate the movie.
Why do you hate the movie?
So basically, The Host is like a 60-chapter book. Like, it's a fairly thick book, and they tried to condense it into this 2-hour film, and everything, all the relationships, all the interactions, either rushed to the point that it's forced, or it's rushed to the point where it's just awkward because they don't show time skips at all. And when they do, it's not done well.
Goombasa, you have an opinion?
I was just I just needed to ask because I was the only thing by Stephanie Meyer I am even remotely familiar with is, of course, the Twilight books, and only through cultural osmosis. I had never heard of this book before, but I'm curious, when did the book and or the movie come out? Because I've never heard of this before.
Oh, I have. I will go on the wiki if you want and have a look.
Yeah, I'm just curious how long ago this all came out.
I shall look it up. The Host.
The book came out in 2008 and the movie came out in 2013.
There she goes, stealing my thunder as moderator. Thank you.
Was about to do the same thing.
And
well, The Host. Yeah, 2013. That's longer ago than I thought it was. I've got to admit, I thought this was more recent, but that would make sense because I think the last Twilight movie was like 2012, wasn't it?
I had forgotten they had sliced that one in two because Harry Potter did that.
And the Hunger Games then did that, and blah, 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 blah. Yes, November 16th, 2012. Midori?
I actually remember when that movie came out because I was working in I believe I was still working in the movie theater when that movie came out, The Host. I didn't watch the movie, but I remember there being a lot of disappointed people, and I remember watching the trailer for this movie. I'm like, how dare you use Imagine Dragons in your trailer? You did not earn Radioactive with this, whatever this teeny bopper shit is.
Oh, Radioactive was such a good song. I do remember, am I right in remembering the music video for that? Didn't involve the host, but did involve puppets fighting each other.
It involved, stuffed animal chicken fights. It had nothing to do with the song at all.
But that's kind of amazing. I'm linking that in the description because everybody needs to see that.
It's like being transported back to the 80s.
I'm a huge fan of Imagine Dragons in any case.
Well, yeah, transported back to the 80s. They were doing Stranger Things before Stranger Things was doing Stranger Things. Which I haven't watched season 3, so nobody spoil it for me.
I haven't watched season 3 yet either, but yeah, I remember that movie when it was coming out, looking at the trailer and just having everybody tell me this doesn't look promising. Like they were just trying to play on like, oh hey, this person wrote Twilight apparently, right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I think that the host was made based purely on the popularity of Maya's name.
Exactly. It was made purely on the popularity of that. And like Panda said, the movie, from what I heard, had like just so much that was rushed about it, and it was just incredibly poorly written.
I recall it being almost interchangeable with the first Divergent film in tone and look and character and cast.
So you think it might have been more accurate to call it more of an in-name only adaptation than claiming that it was directly based on the book?
See, that's the thing. It was based on the book. It was just a very, very poor adaptation. Like, I had no love for this book. I listened to an audiobook version, and it was very by the numbers YA fiction that was popular at the time. You know, I'd read a lot of books very similar to it. I could see the appeal. It had some brilliant ideas, but it was kind of hampered by Maya's very prosaic writing. Yet it was still a good enough passage of time. You wouldn't regret reading it or listening to it in my case. The movie, on the other hand, was very, well, same by the numbers, kind of gives it too much credit. Panda's back. Maybe she can give us some idea on this. Panda, why was the movie adaptation particularly boring?
Honestly, one of the main reasons it was horrid is because it was super, super rushed. Like, the time frame in that book was like months, and how the movie made it seem was like a week or something past.
What did you think of the characters and the cast particularly? Because often I find that when there are adaptations of books that I love, my opinion can live or die from the very start by who they cast. So what did you think of the cast?
The cast themselves, that's kind of how I kind of pictured them. I'm not sure if that's how you pictured them, but that's how I personally did.
I mean, like the job that you thought they did with what they were given. Because sometimes a shitty script can be salvaged by a good cast, and sometimes a bad cast can ruin a good script.
I think they got a shitty script because the rewrite was just
I thought you were gonna say ass. It's like, oh, Panda's muted herself. So, yeah, apparently this film was so boring it doesn't even have a proper scream involved. Just
I mean, that's sort of the nature of adaptation, though. Is it's a very tricky proposition to try and transfer something like a book over into a movie, which has a hard set time limit in which it has to tell its story. Whereas a book, theoretically, could keep going and going for a very long time before you finally reach the end of that story. And so in certain instances, I just don't see it possible to translate an entire book, especially very long books, into just one film. Do you think that if they had given this, like, what they usually do with, if they had given it the Hobbit treatment, let's put it that way, do you think it would have been better?
You mean destroying an entire movie industry of a country in order to get your own way? That?
Well, just no.
Wait, did that movie destroy the movie industry of an entire country?
Yes, it did.
What country?
Well, New Zealand. Hang on. We'll let Panda finish on this, and then I will tell you why The Hobbit wrecked the New Zealand film industry.
Honestly, even if they got like 2 movies, it still would have been better. They not only did they cut out one of the best parts when Wanda was telling her history and where she's been, but they also I hate forced character development with a burning passion, and that's just all this movie is. It's forced character development.
When you say
it's so rushed.
When you say forced, it's basically like the characters are just saying their development rather than actually showing it, that sort of thing?
Yes. That's exactly it. Actually, a good example. In the beginning, Melanie and her host or her soul didn't get along well, and then, oh hey, this is happening. We're best friends now, and it's just like, no, stop that.
It's like Venom and Eddie in Venom.
Yes.
Only worse, and a teenage girl.
See, the first thing that my mind goes to is the anime Parasite for this story.
Oh, I gotta say, the thing that I think of is Animorphs. Anybody remembers that book series from the 90s?
It was a good series, and it got a fairly decent television show too.
It was good up until the ending. I have yet to meet anyone who liked the ending. It was the Game of Thrones of YA books in the 90s. Lots and lots of build-up, and at the very end, everybody just went, the fuck is that ending?
And I don't think K.A. Applegate, the author's response to that, helped matters much, where she essentially put out a very cynical rant about how the world isn't perfect. Sometimes stories do not have happy endings, and you gotta learn to deal with it.
I thought it was like a bunch of people writing under one pen name. But I'm pretty sure K.A. Applegate doesn't actually exist, and it was a bunch of people, like Erin Hunter, who writes the Warrior series. It's actually a group of people.
Really?
Yeah.
I was unaware of that fact.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that. Because I remember being shocked at the time. It was like, oh gosh, I forget her name now. The woman who wrote Flowers in the Attic in the 80s. And there's an entire book series based on Flowers in the Attic, but the author had died after the first one, and there's just been a series of ghostwriters writing the series ever since. And with the Sherlock Holmes and Peter Pan and things have had sequels written by other people, but under the original author's name. Anyway, gotten off track. Do we want to know about this, how The Hobbit destroyed the New Zealand film industry?
Please, this sounds fascinating.
Well, I got this information from Lindsay Ellis's Hobbit reviews trilogy. Well, say trilogy, there's 4 videos. And the last one of the 4, you can watch it independently of the rest, but it explains that when they made The Lord of the Rings, it was a project that nobody thought was going to work. So the studio was a bit more lenient with what Peter Jackson and the budget and different things were being spent on and spending their time on. When it came to The Hobbit, they decided they wanted everything done as cheaply as possible so they could maximize profits. Hence, 3 films to maximize profits. But the thing was, the New Zealand actors who were playing all of the Kiwi actors who were playing all of the dwarves and other characters. There is no acting guild in New Zealand the way that there is like SAG in America. And there's the British Actors Guild that's got a name I don't remember, and the Australian Actors Guild. And the New Zealand actors at the time were being paid way less than everybody else on set. And were also being mistreated for working hours, not being allowed to go to premieres of things. And originally, Peter Jackson wasn't going to direct those movies. It was going to someone else who was making everything on the cheap. And eventually, there was a lot of different legal battles and things. And eventually, Peter Jackson came on board. And he wanted to film in New Zealand. And the film company was kind of against this, despite the fact that Lord of the Rings and New Zealand are kind of synonymous these days. They wanted it to be filmed in, I think it was Bulgaria, because it was cheaper there. There were a lot of tax breaks, which is why a lot of cheap horror films are made in Bulgaria. But he wanted to film in New Zealand. And the New Zealand actors just wanted like a guild of their own to ensure that they got basic rights and a pay grade that was equal to other American extras and things like that. Well, the film studio decided they didn't like this. They didn't like the actors getting unionized. And they said very loudly to the politicians, fine. Well then, we'll just go and film in Bulgaria and New Zealand will lose all of the money we would have spent on filming here. So the politicians then whipped up the people who started saying, no, make sure they film here, don't take away our films, what are you doing? And they turned on the actors. And they turned on the actors so badly that the politicians then made a law that outlawed any unionizing of the film industry. And there were lots of different parts of that law that basically destroyed any rights that filmmakers and actors had in New Zealand so that American filmmakers could come in and make movies there dirt cheap. And thus, The Hobbit, while it may be a beautiful looking film, is very much a poison chalice because it and the studio's greed and the politicians kowtowing have destroyed the New Zealand film industry.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow.
I would advise you go and watch that fourth part of Lindsay Ellis's Hobbit quadrilogy, because she has interviews with a lot of the extras who were involved at the time and some of the politicians going, yeah, that happened.
That's so sad.
And it still hasn't been fixed. It's still all fucked up because American filmmakers want cheap filmmaking in an English-speaking country instead of having to go to Bulgaria.
That is just messed and fucked up on so many goddamn levels.
Yep. Greed. It makes a mockery of us all.
America, you ruin shit.
Goddamn.
America, well, you ruin shit in other countries.
Hey, don't look at me. I live in Mars.
I can't say anything. We had the British Empire.
Late stage capitalism, baby.
I mean, we had Vikings. I don't know if
You're Vikings. You created Britain. It's all your fault.
No one expects
It
the
tracks
American
back.
capitalist inquisition.
Right, after that particular tangent, do we want to keep talking about the host? Or do we want to go on to the next person?
I mean, was there anything else that needed
Panda?
to be noted about it?
I mean, Panda, do you have anything else to say?
I do not unless someone has something to add.
Film is shit, book is okay. There we go. Johnny, what is your film adaptation that you brought to the table?
Oh boy. Okay. So I went through a bunch of ideas. Like, first off, I was really sad that I had not read the original book of The Godfather, because I recently saw that movie, and it's incredible. And so I really wish that I was able to have read the book beforehand, because I heard it's just as good, it's not better. Then my thoughts went to the obvious ones of The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. Harry Potter especially because I have a couple of Harry Potter nuts in my house, especially my big sister, who loathes the movies for several valid reasons. And
You
I
have
some...
Harry Potter's nuts in your house. Doesn't he want them back?
Yeah, I have my own problems as well, especially with some decisions made in the seventh movie. Just bleh. And then, of course, with The Hobbit, but I chose to go, in a way, back to my roots. And I am, in a way, talking about a Danish story. My choice is The Little Mermaid.
Oh, wow. So you mean like the Disney adaptation, or we're talking a live-action one?
The Disney adaptation of the Danish fairy tale written by H.C. Andersen.
Iris has just woken up and will be joining us in a bit.
Oh,
my
there he
dear.
is.
Oh, there he is. Hi, Iris.
Or how about right now?
You sound half asleep still.
Hello, Iris.
I literally spent like most of last night writing my paper on for class.
You don't have to be here if you're tired.
I'm not tired. I just forgot.
Oh, bless. We're
You
just
forgot
about-
because you were tired.
Yeah, exactly. Should we go back to
Anyway.
Little Mermaid? So-
Yes.
So you want to give a brief rundown of... Because I know that these two stories are very different. So you want to give us a rundown of the movie and this fairy tale?
That's something that I was going to say. Like, maybe we should introduce Black Iris, catch him up to speed, and like make sure that he knows what's going on.
Right, so... Iris, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm the latecomer, Black Iris. I'm the sleepy guy who's writing about Franz Liszt for a paper.
Okay, so we'll go down the list with Johnny, then Midori, because otherwise I think Midori might pitch a fit if you go before her because of alphabetical order.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back to you, Iris, and then my one last, as usual. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, so Johnny, the fairy tale and the Disney movie, how are they different?
They followed relatively the same story. The Little Mermaid finds out about the human world and decides to explore it, especially the ships that goes along the waves, and then finds a prince who she helplessly falls in love with, and after a storm breaks his ship and he is clearly about to die in the middle of the ocean, she rescues him and pulls him onto the shore. And after being forbidden to see humans anymore because of that, she goes to the Sea Witch, which in the Disney version is Ursula, who through beautiful musical translation turns her into a human for exchange with her voice. When she then goes up to try and get together with the prince, and shenanigans from there until, The fairy tale, the original fairy tale, follows pretty much the same beats, though with some very interesting differences. In the movie, all of the merfolk are explicitly forbidden from ever going up to the surface to witness the human world, while in the original fairy tale, the Little Mermaid, who remains nameless, and her, I believe, 4 to 5 sisters, who all are year apart in age, are allowed at the age of 15 to go up to the surface and watch the human world. And just as long as you don't interact with them, you are free to see the border, see the beaches, and see and listen to the sounds of humans in their cities, which I think is a very interesting difference. In the story, we only hear about the king of the merfolk, but the real one that our Little Mermaid interacts with is actually a grandmother, who explains to her that humans have their immortal souls that goes on to the heavenly place after they die, while mermaids, while living for 300 years, do not share the same fate. When they die, they turn to foam that brushes along the waves and goes up to the beaches. Of course, Little Mermaid isn't really okay with this once she falls in love with our dear prince. There are several small differences between the movie and the original fairy tale, like the statue that the Little Mermaid, that Ariel finds in the movie from the ship, in the fairy tale is actually one that she sculpted herself in her garden. There's no fish, there's no cute Jamaican crabs to sing about how the sea is the better place, which I personally believe in is a lie. But yes, she finds the prince, helps him onto the shore, and is then, only then, forbidden from by her grandmother to interact with the human world, because she fears of, well, what would happen to her dear granddaughter if she got too close. But then, of course, the Little Mermaid goes to the Sea Witch, where her garden is described as pretty much a forest of polyps, which seems to be a mix of half plants and half beasts, with the fingers seeming a worm-like twitching and going everywhere, reaching out to whatever they can grasp. It's pretty freaking creepy for a child. Remember, this is a children's story.
Yep, they pulled no punches.
This is like, I believe this was read to me in kindergarten. And when it comes to the whole of the mermaid becoming human and giving her voice, in the original fairy tale, she isn't just like her voice in essence is stolen from her. The witch cuts out her tongue.
Yep, I remember this story.
Yes. And from there, and the witch explains to her, and I believe they don't say this in the movie at all, but there is a price along with, the loss of your tongue that comes with being a human and getting your legs. You can walk around. You will dance like you will be the most beautiful dancer when it comes to the balls and everything. But every time she takes a step, it will feel like she is walking on sharp blades and knives, and as a result, her feet will actually physically bleed.
Yeah, I remember. You're saying all these things. I'm like, yeah, I remember that being in a story tape that my mum got for me to watch when I was little, where they just turned the pages and told the story, and I'm like, the fuck, this isn't like Disney.
Nah, this is not Disney. Frozen's supposed to be based on the Snow Queen. Ha!
Goombasa?
Well, Johnny just actually made my point. I was just going to say that's pretty much what Disney does, is they take a well-known fairy tale or a more contemporary book, like 101 Dalmatians and Mary Poppins and Winnie the Pooh were all based on books that were pretty contemporary at the time.
Pinocchio as well. Everybody forgets that Pinocchio was a book. It's not a fairy tale at all. It's actually coming up as the next Pinky Tales. And I did sort of say at the screen going, that's a book. That's not a fairy tale.
A very, very dark book, by the way. But that's what Disney does, is they do these adaptations where they basically clean it up so that it's much more family-friendly and more contemporary. And in doing so, it loses a lot of its horrific edge. And then
Oh.
everybody forgets about the original and just remembers the Disney version. Like, how many of us can say that we were aware that 101 Dalmatians was actually based on a book, for example? Because I know I didn't.
I knew, but then again, I was a bookworm as a kid, and this entire conversation is going to become very relevant when we get to my pick.
Oh boy.
Yes. So, Johnny, do you actually like what Disney did with this adaptation?
Well, they did take a after reading the story for this podcast, I realized that there was a lot of Christian overtones because they talk about how the mermaid only could get an immortal soul, or at least part of it, if she manages to marry the prince, and he gives his eternal love to her. Only then she can get a part of his immortal soul, and thus she can live and die like them. And it is interesting to see how much the Disney version differs from the original fairy tale. Not only taking out all of the grim details, but also making I don't know how else to say it, but making it more relatable to young girls, as I can say, with the overprotective father who is constantly no, only I know what's best for you. You stay here because the human world is dangerous and blarg. And yeah, of course, he has a reason in the movie for why he acts like that. But the main difference that always comes to me when it comes to think about the Disney adaptation versus the fairy tale is the ending. Because close to the ending, the prince is going to marry another woman who he thinks saved him, which of course was the mermaid. And
wasn't the sea witch in the original tale?
Exactly. Ursula, the sea witch, did not interfere with the prince at all.
Yeah, it's just this random princess who was completely innocent, who just happened to talk.
Yeah, and she was told by the witch that if the prince found someone else to marry, on the day after the wedding, the mermaid would die and turn to foam. It's that's a kind of a harsh deal to give a girl like that. But the witch is interfering even further, because close to the story, the mermaid's sisters comes up to the surface, and their beautiful flowing hair has been cut in exchange for a knife that the witch gave to them to give to the mermaid. And they explain that if the little mermaid takes the knife given from the witch and stabs the prince in the heart while he sleeps, and makes sure that his blood gets over her feet and legs, she will be able to return into being a mermaid and can return to her 300 years of life. But of course, once the mermaid goes into the room to stab the prince and sees him and his to-be bride, she can't do it. She throws the knife into the ocean and jumps off the boat. By the way, they were on the boat, forgot to mention that. As dawn came, and she turned to foam before hitting the waves. That's kind of heavy.
I always thought that the ending was that she turned to foam, but then God intervened and made her into a spirit?
That is correct. Because every mermaid tells the same thing. When you turn to foam, that is it. There is nothing. But when the mermaid is turned to foam and strikes the ocean waves, she suddenly finds herself floating in the air amongst hundreds of other spirits, which are called the Daughters of the Air, which, fun fact, was going to be the original title of the story before Anderson changed it to The Little Mermaid, as I think kind of a foreshadowing to the final results. But again, with the Christian overtones, the Spirits of Air tells the Little Mermaid that for 100 years, if she helps humankind, if she does good deeds, if she helps people along the way, for 100 years, she will be accepted into heaven.
Right. I remember that. Wasn't she put in charge of children and the good dreams of children?
Yeah, just doing good deeds in general. Which, all of this, by the way, if you don't know how big the story is, it's about 22 pages.
Yeah, it was very light on dialogue, as I recall.
It is. It is mostly Anderson spends most of the time to just explain the raw feelings and emotions of the mermaid that she is feeling, as well as the surroundings, as how he describes the ocean floor, the waves, the wind, the mermaids themselves, just everything. He goes into great details about the surroundings.
Yeah, it was very like the Brothers Grimm and the original fairy tales. So
Oh,
Disney
sorry,
did.
I completely missed the question about what I think about the Disney movie
Yeah, I was
in
gonna say,
comparison.
Disney is as Disney does, but what did you think about the adaptation?
Yeah, sorry, I get a bit lost in rambling. Hey, rambling!
It's fine. It's called Babble Scribbler for a reason.
Anyway, when it comes to the Disney version, I know why they did things that they did. I love the hell out of the songs, and Ursula the sea witch turning into a giant monster that is then being impaled by a ship. Still kind of a brutal ending.
Impaled and then electrified by lightning, because we saw her fucking skeleton.
Exactly. And while I do admit that I'm not really that much of a fan of how they portrayed Ariel, because, well, it is very much my dad doesn't understand me, the world doesn't understand me, only I and my few close friends understand me, and all that stuff.
I want more.
Exactly.
She was the princess who said it.
That is pretty true. And like, I understand the additions, and all in all, I think that the Disney version is an okay film. It's an okay film. If you want something to show the kids, I don't think The Little Mermaid is a poor choice. But comparison to the original story, it's not because I want Disney to go all bloody mayhem and murder, but I believe that it misses some of the impact that the original story had.
Panda, I see you've made a mark in the channel. You have something to say?
One thing I have noticed with Disney and how they adapt things is they seem not to realize that not every story has to have a happy ending, and that changes the entire story of most of their older films.
Well, yeah. I mean, for modern reasons, like from the 60s and 70s onwards, a lot of that was marketing, being able to sell things, especially when home video came out. Again, this will become relevant when it gets to my choice. But yeah, there has been something that Disney have been pulled up on in recent years, that whenever they have tried to stray outside of their wheelhouse, they do kind of get their investors and their advertisers going, excuse me, can't sell that. We can't sell pretty pink princesses if they're lopping the heads off things. Poor Merida.
Poor Mulan.
I mean, Mulan, at the very least, is getting a remade film. Merida, nah, she's stuffed. She got the plot of Brother Bear in Scotland, and that was it. Goombasa, you've made a mark as well.
Another thing that this conversation about the differences sort of brought up in my mind was the idea that a good adaptation is also something that can sort of stand on its own. It doesn't really require you to be familiar with the source material. It can definitely help, and it can give some really interesting context, especially when the film version is so different from the story. But one thing that I will give Disney adaptations credit for is almost none of them require you to be familiar with the source material. They do stand on their own as adaptations and as films in their own right.
Again, this is, when we get to my choice. Iris.
All this foreshadowing.
Yeah, you'll understand the moment I tell you the title. Sorry, Iris.
So I also want to mention on this subject is that when you're making an adaptation of anything into any medium, you have to make that adaptation for the medium, which I think Disney is conscious about when they make their adaptations. Because when you're making something that has visual and audio elements, you gotta make sure it has really good audio and visual elements for the story and make sure it works for there. I've seen a lot of adaptations of things from the printed word to a visual media that utterly fails at, making sure it's very good for the visual medium and it's conveying stuff with the visual medium and not just through narration. And they suck when they try to do it like that.
Yep. So I'm going to say that when it comes to The Little Mermaid, while I do like the film, in retrospect, it is kind of problematic in that Ariel's motivations in the Disney adaptation, and largely in the original fairy tale, are very, very shallow. She, at the very least in the Disney version, they did give her an interest in the human world before she was motivated by seeing Eric and falling in love. But by the same token, she doesn't change as the story goes on. She has no character arc other than learning her dad was right, but then he was wrong, but then she got her own way anyway. And I find that kind of problematic, that she doesn't grow as a character other than realizing, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't lie to my parents. And when you look at other Disney characters, things like Belle, she learns as she's going through things not to judge by appearances and to see the beauty within the beast. When you look at like somebody suggest another Disney film to me because I'm blanking.
Mulan.
I was about to say.
I was about to say The Lion King.
Quasimodo.
Oh yeah.
Oh god, that original story.
Quasimodo learning that Frollo was not his friend and learning not to trust everybody, but to also not distrust everybody. We've got Mulan, who learns that being strong doesn't necessarily mean having to lie about who you are. Lion King, learning to take responsibility for bad things is not bad. Growing up is not just getting bigger, it's taking your responsibility for things that you're supposed to be responsible for. And Goombasa.
After thinking about it for a second, there's another Disney film that I think takes the basic plot threads of The Little Mermaid and actually does it better, and that's Tangled.
Yep.
Because when you think about it, the plots are very similar. You have someone who is shut away from the world, is very interested in seeing the outside of the world, has a very overprotective parental figure, and is sort of given an opportunity to go out and see the world, see both its bad sides and its good sides, but doesn't really have a lot of the drawbacks that Ariel had to deal with when she tried it. But in Tangled, Rapunzel's motivations are made much more clear, and it's not really for any sort of selfish reason. It's more out of legitimate naivete, and you see her grow and change as the story goes on. And of course, we also have a lot of those original elements from The Little Mermaid are made more complex and expanded upon, like the overprotective parental figure in this case is a very strong allegory for an abusive mother, a mentally abusive mother.
Yeah, Tangled was definitely updated for a different crowd, because one of the reasons that Ariel ended up in 1989 with no mother was because it was a direct reaction to the rise of divorce and single parents in America. And Tangled was a reflection of the rise of awareness of abusive parenting. Hello, Puss. You hear me talking about dark things and you're going, fuck this, stroke me. But yeah, I've got to say, to this day, my favorite Disney villain of all time is Mother Gothel, because she's so subtle. Everything about her is so well done and well planned, even down to tiny little movements like when she says I love you and kisses Rapunzel. She always turns her head down so she's kissing the hair. She never ever expresses proper emotion of love or affection to Rapunzel herself. It's always to the hair, and I love those little touches.
She is always insulting Rapunzel too, but she plays it off as like a joke. She is doing everything but just outright calling her stupid or things like that. And it's a really subtle touch, but that is kind of how emotional and mental abuse sort of works. They aren't outright belligerent about it. They just slowly suggest that maybe the person they're abusing is these things, and they do it playfully so that it's not outright malicious.
Yes, that moment with the mirror where she says, you know what I see when I look in that mirror? And she turns Rapunzel to the mirror and says, I see a strong, independent woman. Oh, look, and you're here too. It's like she manages to turn this moment of boosting Rapunzel up into another jab. And it is so well written. When you go back and you look at everything that's written, all of Mother Gothel's dialogue is very, very well written, and it's so well acted as well. And then you go back to Little Mermaid, and her reactions to her father are all very shallow. And I love Triton as a character. I think that he has a put-upon father trying his best to manage all these daughters without his wife. Apparently in the original treatment of the film, he did talk about his dead wife and how he wished that her name was Athena, as turned out in some of the later films. he did talk about missing her and wishing she was there because he's struggling to parent all their daughters, and especially Ariel because she's the youngest and the wildest. And that would have given him a bit more character. As it is, he just comes off as generic dad figure. Johnny?
But that is one thing that I appreciated about the Little Mermaid Disney movie, because it's just like with the father in How to Train Your Dragon. The father, he messes up. He says things to both fathers says things to their child. Both of them does things, but you always see the regret and pain on their face for having to do it right afterwards. Like they felt like they had to do it, even though it hurt on both ends. So that kind of detail I do appreciate when you have to show that harsh parent.
But that kind of feeds into what I said about the problem I have with Ariel is that she doesn't grow. She is fundamentally the same character at the end as she was at the start. She's maybe a bit more worldly, but everything she wanted, she got without having to learn anything first. Just think back to that plot. Every time there was an obstacle in the way, it never required her to change as a character. She was always the same person right up until the very end with that kiss. And that kind of bothers me as a character, that she doesn't change or grow, which is why Tangled is better. What does anybody else think? Johnny?
Yeah, like as a main character, Ariel for me is one of the weakest ones because, as you said, she is so bland. Like, like the mermaid in the original fairy tale, she does have that pain because she loves the prince. She would love to return to the merfolk, but she would rather sacrifice herself because, well, he has found his bride. He has found happiness, so she couldn't take that away from her. And that struck me a lot harder than anything Ariel ever did than in the Disney movie. So yeah, I agree with you. I wish we had gotten more of Ariel, like growth at more points, like a bit more to add to her.
Yeah. Right, do we have any more to say about Little Mermaid? Goombasa.
Just as one more point, because I'm sure somebody in the comments will bring it up, and in this day and age it is kind of relevant. Do you think that they will incorporate more from the original fairy tale into the live-action remake that they apparently have coming out for The Little Mermaid?
No.
I highly doubt it.
No.
Maybe they will hint at it, but I don't think so.
Nope, I absolutely do not think so, because they didn't with The Lion King, and it made $1 billion, and it's only been a couple of weeks. Nope, well, I reckon anything from the Disney Renaissance, they're just going to do shot-for-shot remake. Maybe add in a little bit here and there, but it won't be anything that's dark from the original fairy tale. Look at the Beauty and the Beast remake. The stuff they added in was to fix plot points, and then create more of them, none of which was from the original fairy tale.
Well, I only bring it up because apparently their idea for the remake of Mulan is to adhere more closely to the original legend.
Yeah, but that's to sell it in China.
I suppose that is true, yes. I was just kind of curious if you felt that they would take this approach with any of their other upcoming remakes, which they have like 5 or 6 that they've already announced that are coming out and whatnot. I
know of The Great Mouse Detective. What other ones have they got coming out?
Let's see. There's Little Mermaid, Great Mouse Detective, Mulan. I'm trying to think.
I swear there's more than that. After Mulan, there's some that they've already optioned that I haven't started production work on yet. But they're all bigger ones. They're none of the
Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
Yeah, it's none of the more obscure ones. They're largely from the Renaissance and the ones that they know are going to make money.
Oh, Lady and the Tramp. That's another one.
That was it, yes. But they did say that with that, they're not going full CGI, and all the dogs that are in it are rescue dogs.
Well, yay for that. I really wish I could take that more. Yeah.
I know, it's about the only... that's the only thing I can think of that's good about that film is, well, at least they donated some stuff to charity, but yeah.
I'm looking at a list right now. Let's see. We've got one based on Cruella that's coming out.
The fuck?
Yep.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Let's see. The Sword and the Stone, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Lilo and Stitch.
Oh, the fuck off!
Don't touch my Stitch!
A sequel to The Jungle Book, Pinocchio.
Again.
A remake of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs that's going to be called Rose Red.
Really?
Oh, no, wait. They're making two
Wait,
versions of this. They're
Rose
making
Red
Wait,
and
what?
Snow White is a completely different fairy tale.
No, they're saying right here, like in the Wikipedia list I'm looking at, they're doing Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, but before that they're making one called Rose Red.
Yeah, because the characters in that, they're two sisters called Snow White and Rose Red, and it's a completely different story.
Yeah, apparently those two are going to be. Yeah, okay, that's why. They have listed under the original animated film for Rose Red as Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. That's why.
Oh. So Rose Red may be an animated movie.
No, it's listed under specifically live action.
Ah, fuck. Are they gonna redo The Princess and the Frog?
Nope, that's not in the list as of right now. But under planned projects, like, those are all just upcoming ones that they've announced. For planned projects, they're going to do one for Peter Pan that's going to premiere on Disney Plus, and a live-action film for Tinkerbell. Prince Charming is getting his own movie called Charming.
Hang on, which Prince Charming? There's a couple of them.
It just says Prince Charming.
Okay.
Is getting a spin-off, a live-action spin-off film called Charming. There's also going to be a prequel to Aladdin called Genies that is going to come out. Yeah, it's getting way out of hand.
It sounds like it.
Disney are having a goddamn fetish with this.
It's not even that. It's because they're making money and they're still cheaper to make than animation. They are a surer bet than animation. Panda, you had something to say.
I know that Disney has a thing where they remake the films after so long, but it's just like, Disney, stop the fucking live action. Stop
They're not going to because it makes money. Disney is very much cashing in on nostalgia, and since they own most of the film industry now.
True.
Right. That's depressing. Okay. I'm not skipping you, Midori. What are you talking about?
I put a little done.
We hadn't even finished Johnny's one yet. You're on next.
No, that's what I mean. Like, did my dot before Panda's not show?
No, sorry. Go on then, Midori. I didn't mean like that. I didn't even see yours before Panda. Sorry.
Oof.
Midi.
All right, so like I've been relatively silent for a lot of the Little Mermaid one because a lot of people had a lot to say and whatnot, and I don't have a lot to say that hasn't been said already, other than stuff that, like, you know, I'm worried could turn into tangents. Like, for example, how the Little Mermaid story was incorporated into Dragon Quest XI. Like, they actually had that story take place in Dragon Quest XI, and you watch as the Little Mermaid, like, she turns into sea foam because she lost the man that she loved and everything. Like, she sacrificed, like, she basically committed suicide to be with him.
Yep.
In that story.
Yep.
And also, I just like found it interesting that Johnny described the things in the Sea Witch's garden as like polypuses. And I'm just like, okay, that's some Cthulhu-esque shit right there.
Legit, that's how it's described in the book. Half plant, half beast things.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it sounds like something out of Annihilation from Beyond the Shimmer. And like two of my viewers will get that reference.
I got it. It's a good movie.
Yay!
3.
Yay! You are the 2 viewers who get it. It is a very good movie. Screaming Bear for the win.
God, not the bear.
And I just gotta say, I really hope that Disney doesn't ruin like a couple of those like animated movies that were actually like they were good, and like I feel like they could be better. But I worry that these like live action adaptations are not going to be that, and that is specifically for The Great Mouse Detective and The Sword in the Stone.
We can hope for the best and prepare for the worst. Do we have anything more to say on Little Mermaid, Johnny?
No, I believe I have rambled enough for this video.
There is never enough rambling. Right, Midi, that means that you get to talk again, because what is your choice?
Well, initially I had a couple of different choices to choose from. Just 2. One of them was Eragon, which the movie adaptation for that was god awful. It was so bad. Like, I remember watching that movie and thinking, wow, this like changed so much from the book. It's just so bad. But the funny thing is, I don't feel like I really need to talk about that one, especially since the book series eventually started to suck, like, a lot, like, especially with that friggin' ending. So I decided, like,
hang on, that friggin' ending. Okay, spoilers for anybody who's not read this. What's the ending?
The last 100 pages, I counted them. Like, there was 100 pages left in the book for the story itself, and it's like, okay, we defeated the big, like, after they defeated the big bad guy by making him feel bad. Yeah, like that's a very simplified version of it, but like,
okay,
let me
behold the powers of depression.
Yes, actually, like the heroes go in there. We've got everybody that's been built up and brought together. They all go in there, and Galbatorix just freezes them all in place. Like, oh, I just let you guys get here. I was strong enough to defeat you all from the get-go. Like, I'm just toying with you guys. And it's like, none of us can move, none of us can fight him, none of us can do anything. How the fuck are we supposed to do anything? And then Eragon somehow manages to cast a spell, and it's a complicated spell that basically makes Galbatorix feel all the pain that he's ever inflicted on anyone ever, and he can't handle it, so he basically forces himself to cease to exist. And then we spend the last 100 pages of the book basically establishing that almost nobody gets a happy ending. It's like, you know what? I'm going to leave forever. Why don't you come with me? Oh, you know, I would now that I'm finally in love with you, but I agreed to be the new queen of the elves, which you're not supposed to do when you're an immortal. It is the whole reason for the plot of this entire fucking series that Galbatorix decided to be royalty. But yeah, I'm going to be royalty, and you can leave forever, and I'm going to be sad. My dragon's going to be sad because my dragon fell in love with your dragon. Well, is anybody else going to have a happy ending? I mean, I'm getting married. Great. What about anybody else? Anybody else having a happy ending? No, I'm going to be miserable. No, my life sucks. Yeah, bye.
So I just want to mention that I had a friend when I was in high school who contends that this book series is somehow a masterpiece, and I just keep looking at him like, you just haven't read a lot of books, have you, buddy? And like, yeah. I've read the books. I think they're okay. They're like how some movies are just like popcorn eating fare. I call this like my popcorn book. Just read it for like trashiness. I don't think it's a masterpiece or anything. It's okay. It's familiar beats. It
was written by a 15-year-old, wasn't it?
18-year-old.
I thought he was 15 when he wrote the first one. Sorry, I'm just trying to clarify. Iris, keep talking. I'll go check the wiki.
And he basically just follows the hero's journey, like trope path to the T. So you've seen this story a billion times.
Okay, he is shit. The author of that book, Christopher Paolini, is like just short of a month older than me. Literally. Fuck.
Yeah, but when he first wrote
that's what I'm trying to
book.
work out. It's like, oh god, what was I doing at that point? So yeah, he was 15. No, he wasn't. He was 17. Sorry. He was 17 when he wrote. Yeah, he was 17 when he wrote the first book in 2002. Lovely. In 2002, I was still writing Tenchi Muyo fan fiction.
And his writing just slowly got worse and worse.
So that wasn't even your choice, was it? Hang on. I think I may have missed somebody's dot.
Panda?
Goombasa was next, and then it was Panda. Sorry.
I just wanted to point out that the way you describe them defeating the villain Midori is exactly the same way that the villain is defeated in the Neverending Story 2. So...
Oh god, I forgot about that!
That's the level of complexity that we're dealing with here.
Sorry, my squeal woke up Puss. He's not happy now. You alright, baby? Oh, you're okay, sweetheart. Panda?
Wait, I made a dot.
You did make it up. Did you not have anything to say?
No.
Okay. Does anybody have anything to say about that one? Because that wasn't even Midori's actual choice.
Yeah, I just hate the way that series, the book series, ended, and it paints the entire rest of the series in a whole new negative light, and the movie is even worse than the book series. So yeah, that's why I decided not to go with that one. I decided to go with a movie adaptation that I actually enjoyed.
And that is?
The Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Oh, I have not yet seen that movie. I've got to admit.
It is delightful because The Fantastic Mr. Fox, the book, I read that book, or at least we read it in my 4th grade class together.
So you like it was your class reader?
Yes, and I will admit, I don't read a ton of books. I don't even read a ton of fan fictions, which is part of why I became part of Them's Writing Words, so that I could be motivated to look into more fan fictions, look into more stories, and discuss them more.
And suggest the only fic so far, apart from Dance, that we've actually liked.
I mean, there's that. But The Fantastic Mr. Fox was a very simple story, and the movie actually built on the original story in a way that was good.
So go on then. The original book was by Roald Dahl, acclaimed children's author. What is the baseline story, and how did the movie change it?
The baseline story is about Mr. Fox, who is the bane of existence to these 3 farmers who finally one day decide, you know what? We're sick of this fox. We're going to camp out in front of his hole, and we're going to shoot him when he finally comes out of his burrow. And Fantastic Mr. Fox, the witty devil that he is just like, hey, they're going to stay right there outside my hole, so that means that they're not guarding their farms that I like to steal stuff from. So he and his family dig holes to all their different farms and steal lots of chickens, steal lots of like duck and various types of meat and stuff, and they steal lots of apple cider and whatnot from the third guy's farm. Apparently he only drinks apple cider. Like, he doesn't eat, he doesn't drink anything else, he just drinks apple cider and nothing but.
Boggis and Bunce and Bean were the 3 farmers.
Yes. And Fantastic Mr. Fox, he even gets a bunch of like vegetables and stuff, and he digs holes to all his animal friends' houses and invites them all to dinner, and they all have a big old feast, and they're super happy, and Bogus Bunts and Beans or whatever. Bogus
and Bunts and Bean. One fat,
Bogus
one
and
short,
Bunts
one
and
lean.
Beans.
I remember that from a kid.
Yeah, the 3 of them just stay out there outside his hole, the burrow that they know about, and wait for him until like the end of time while he feasts on his stolen goods from their farms with all his animal friends. And that was the end of the story in the book.
And how did the film change that, if it did? I have not seen the film, so I don't know.
The film is amazing because it actually gives all the characters. It gives them personalities, gives them quirks. It has lots of humor and story. And when it gets to that point where like has this feast with all his animal friends and whatnot, because that does happen actually in the movie, that's actually the halfway point of the movie.
Oh.
And you might think to yourself, well, where can this go from here? And that's just the thing. Bogus Bunts and Bean figure out what's going on, and they flood the burrow. And Fox and his friends, they end up trapped in the sewers. Like, they get pushed into the sewers where they can't dig anywhere, they don't have any food, and they're freaking out. And Bogus Bunts and Beans, they are like literally getting the police involved, like calling out Mr. Fox, like, get out here so that we can kill you and your family and all your animal friends can go free. Like, they even kidnap his like nephew and whatnot, trying to hold
Mr. Fox's nephew.
Yeah, yes, they managed to get their hands on Mr. Fox's nephew and hold him ransom as well. So Mr. Fox, with all his animal friends, they put together a plan, managed to escape from the sewers without getting shot, and they managed to free the nephew. And it even has this really awesome scene with his son, with a callback to like earlier in the movie. Actually, I don't want to spoil too much about the movie, but it's a really good story. Like, it's really awesome how they managed to defeat them and everything. And then at the end of the movie, they find their way to like underground a grocery store, and they're like, we can live here in peace, eat for free for the rest of time, and they just dance.
That seems to be a theme with a lot of films. Just end with a dance number. Johnny and then Goombasa.
Just want to quickly say off that I haven't actually seen this movie, and it's just that this story sounds really good. But the thing I just wanted to mention is, isn't this movie either by puppets or stop animation?
Stop motion, yeah.
The entire movie is stop animation.
That's like, I heard of that, and I think I've seen some clips, and it looks really good, and now the story looks really good. So now, like, I have to check this thing out.
It's actually,
it also has quite a stellar cast as well, doesn't it? George Clooney is Mr. Fox.
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite films of all time. It's actually a really good movie, and it's based on such a simple children's book. Which
was set in Britain, and then the movie's in America, which I remember that being one of the reasons I didn't want to watch it. Simply because it was such a part of my childhood. But, Goombasa, you wanted to go next.
I will say, as somebody who has read the book and seen the film, I do think it is a good film, but one thing that you should know going in is that it is very much a product of its time. Like,
which I'm looking at, it was 2009. Holy shit, that film's 10 years old.
Yeah. But what I mean by that is the original children's book, of course, it's a Roald Dahl book, and so it has this element of timelessness to it. Like, you could have some child from pretty much any era read that book and they would still be able to enjoy it. But the movie itself, it not only is it expanded upon, but it also aims to capture a much wider, more general audience. And so there's a lot of musical references in it from like the 2000s and even the 1990s. There's a lot of references to like early internet memes and whatnot. And it's not invasive, but when they start throwing around like what would have been at the time modern day catchphrases or things like that, it can be a little bit distracting. Like, you can definitely tell that it was made more in mind to sort of capture the 2009 audience and only the 2009 audience. Because if you go back and watch it and you weren't really aware of pop culture at the time, some of the references that they make and some of the lines that they spout sound very strange with no context.
Now, hold on a second. Like, when I watched that movie, like that none of that is the stuff that really stuck with me about that movie. Like,
well, like I said, I think it's a good film, but I do also think that is one way that the adaptation expansion sort of in the long run could potentially hurt the film. It's not to say that your enjoyment of the film is bad at all, and I'm glad that you enjoy it, and I enjoy it too, but in comparison to the original book, it has dated itself quite heavily.
Well, I feel like the original book, the reason why it's timeless is partially because it doesn't really have a lot of conflict. Like, it has about as much conflict as, I don't know, a Peter Cottontail book. Like, basically, it's just these three farmers, they are tired of him stealing from them, so they want to shoot him. But he doesn't really, like, have a lot of conflict with this and works around it incredibly easily. And it's just him being a clever fox and having a good time.
Well, yes, but the book itself is meant to be really simple. It's meant for very young readers. I would dare say it's probably the simplest book that Roald Dahl wrote for the young audience.
I suppose that's very fair. That's very true. I mean, I was in 4th grade when I originally read that story, so, like, how else was I going to comprehend it?
Yeah, Roald Dahl had a very lyrical style of storytelling that it is quite timeless in a lot of ways, that I still, as an adult, read his books, and I enjoy them, but that's because of the timeless nature of them. And there are some books that can maintain that level of timelessness in their prose. One a more recent version of that I would say is the Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. That book does have a timeless quality about it because of the nature of how it's written, but most books don't. And therefore, when you're making adaptations, a lot of studios are more used to adapting books that are products of their time rather than timeless ones, and maintaining that timelessness is very difficult. Does anyone have anything to add about Fantastic Mr. Fox? Panda, you've been very, very quiet. Are you okay?
I haven't seen.
Have you read the
Or
book
read.
or seen the movie?
Yeah. I was 9 when this movie came out.
Oh, you're such a baby.
No.
You are little babu of the chat. You actually are the youngest one in here.
I know.
Little
Only
baby panda.
Little baby panda.
Little bean.
Yeah. All of your fandom parents in here, minus this fam. We just get a mother and father you. That's it. Right, okay. What was I going to say? Yes. So, just a quick question then, Panda. Since you've not read the book or seen the film, has this discussion made you curious?
It has, mostly because I love stop motion films.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice if, what's the company who did Kubo and the Two Strings and Coraline and...
Studio Leica?
That's it. I did not realize that last year they did release, and I think it's last year, or it might be this year, they released a film about a primordial man, and I had no idea it was them.
Yeah, Mr. Link, or The Missing Link, I think it was called.
That was it, Missing Link. But their name was not attached to it anywhere. I would have gone and seen it if I'd known it was them, but it was very poorly marketed, which is a shame, because Leica Animation, Kubo and the Two Strings is one of my favourite films of all time. I love it.
God, the 2 strings. When you find out what the 2 strings are at the end of that movie.
We're not going to spoil that one, because that's the kind of film where everybody has to go in cold and see it.
Ironically, The Missing Link is one of their most, mainstream films, and consequently, despite its poor marketing, it is one of the most financially successful films that Leica has made.
Shit, that means they're going to make more of that. Did they do Paranorman?
I think they did Paranorman.
I'm
pretty sure they did Paranorman.
Someone wiki that!
Come on.
I'm on.
I can't because my Chrome is scrubbed right now.
That just makes it sound like you've been there with
They
a scrubbing
did.
brush against a chrome.
I
Here we
don't
go.
want no scrubs.
They have to date made 5 feature films: Coraline, Paranorman, The Box Trolls, Kubo and the Two Strings, and Missing Link. But they were they also did some contract work for other movies like King of California and Corpse Bride.
Oh,
Corpse Bride is
I love
underrated.
Corpse Bride so much.
Corpse Bride is pretty good. If only it didn't have Johnny Depp in it. I did not realize they were the Box Trolls creators. I may have to try and get past the ugliness of that film or give it a look. It's so ugly. Oh fuck! I just I may just go and watch Kubo and the Two Strings again.
No, I've got to amend myself because I made a very bad error. Apparently, Missing Link was one of their worst grossing films.
Oh no!
Yep, it had a budget of $100 million, which was much higher than any film they had done prior.
Oh no!
But it only raked in $24.7 million in gross.
Oh no!
Well, it doesn't help that it was very poorly advertised, clearly, and also I remember that they were weren't they starting to do bad financially anyways?
Because Kubo and the Two Strings did not make very much money. It was a critical darling and a commercial failure, which is a shame because it's such a fucking good film. I got a Don Bluth, early Don Bluth vibe from Kubo and the Two Strings. Don't know if anybody else got the same thing, but it was very much like Secret of Nim-esque. Oh, that's made me sad now.
Yeah, I don't know if I can say I see the direct correlation between the two, but I definitely get what you're getting at comparing it to early Don Bluth.
It has that more adult tint to the storytelling, not the let's stick in loads of blood and gore and call it more mature, but the storytelling itself is more mature.
It's not afraid to focus on themes that might be a little bit heavy for a younger audience, yeah.
Well, it starts off with a character whose mum is brain damaged, and he looks after her because she is incapable of doing it herself. And it deals with things like the loss of a parent and dealing with death. And that's really heavy for a kid's film, to deal with the concept of death and loss and grief. Rah. Should have done better. Everybody needs to go and watch Kubo and the Two Strings. Legally, so they get money. This is one of those times where I'm not going to advocate anybody like getting a streamed version that's for free or anything. Go and watch it via some kind of legal means, because Leica needs to not go under as a studio.
Does Netflix count?
Yes, because they still have to pay for that.
I technically have it on DVD.
Yay!
I think Leica and Aardman are the only two studios I can think of that are actually doing, like, pretty much everything stop motion right now.
Although Aardman did noodle with CGI with things like Flushed Away.
That is true, yeah.
And Flushed Away is an underrated film. It's nothing great, but it is a fun way to spend 90 minutes. Plus Hugh fucking Jackman. That man can do no wrong. Do you know that Hugh Jackman, apparently, I think he was on a radio show or something like that, and this rando rang up and had a quick chat with him on this talk show, and he said at the end, like, I'm having a barbecue. Like, jokingly, I live in this place, I'm having a barbecue. If you and your family want to, you can stop by. And he did. He went to this guy's random barbecue. I love Hugh Jackman. Right.
He's awesome.
Yeah. Does anybody have anything else to say about this?
I am back.
You are back. You are back. You are front. You are all the sides and everything in between.
Tucker is still asleep outside our bedroom door. I think he's going for a record. I think he wants to just lay out there for 24 hours straight until it's dinner time again.
Aww.
So Mitty, I gotta ask. Fantastic Mr. Fox, you said it's one of your favorite films, right? And
Yeah.
you still really like the book?
Yeah.
So I just have to ask, how do you think it compares to the other adaptations of Roald Dahl's work? Because there have been quite a few of them over the years.
Some stop motion.
Yep, some stop motion, some CGI, because I believe the recent BFG movie was all in CG.
Oh,
And-
the BFG movie. BFG was written by that author.
Yep. BFG,
Yep.
The Twits, The Witches.
Matilda, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
He was a very prolific author.
Oh, I like all these things.
He's like he
Love
is
Matilda.
the favorite author of a lot of people from their childhoods for a reason.
I've watched so many of these movies and I enjoy all of them.
You need to read the books.
You really, really do.
I'm
Matilda
sorry.
is
Well, the
such a good book.
audio books
Please
are
read
all
it.
on YouTube. Go and read the book.
I have a hard time multitasking, I'll be listening
but-
to them, but
So read the actual books then.
but then I can't do anything else.
Yeah, but you're
Also-
reading, so you wouldn't want to.
Also, there was, I don't remember if he was directly involved with it, but there was a children's cookbook that was released called
Yes.
Roald Dahl's Revolting Recipes. I think I brought this up before.
It was
But
based
it's-
on the Revolting Rhymes, yeah.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite books as a kid, and it's literally a cookbook that teaches you how to make real-life versions of things that were in his book. Like, they have the hot ice cream for cold days from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the snozcumber from
Snoz.
BFG, which is basically just a hollowed-out cucumber with tuna fish in it.
Yep.
It was just, I remember thinking it was incredibly creative.
Yeah, and it kicked off, I think it kicked off, or it might have been part of, the short-lived glut of children's books that had recipe books attached, like Brian Jakes and the Redwall series, you had a recipe book based on that, which I remember wanting so much because I loved the Redwall books, but never actually got.
That must have been a British thing, because I recall none of that happening over here.
You had the Redwall TV series as well, though, didn't you?
We had Redwall, and we did have the Redwall TV series, though it was never on a channel where any of us could actually watch it. But yeah, we never got like the recipe books or anything.
So you never got Tim Curry's Slaver Fox then?
No.
Oh my god!
Excuse me, isn't Redwall the show with like the mice and the rats in the Middle Ages?
Yes, that's
Yes.
it.
Oh god, I love that show, and the snake scared me.
Yep, and Tim Curry was the villain of the second season. He was a slaver fox who always wore a colourful mask over his face that covered everything. He could see through the mesh, but we couldn't see anything of his face, because in the previous season he was a young character grown up who had been scarred really badly in the first season and therefore became the enemy in the second season. And there were consequences to defeating bad guys in these books, and they usually came back in a later book.
I was always interested in Redwall, but I always looked at how much material there was, and there was even I think there was a board game. I know there was a tabletop RPG, and I was looking at all this stuff, and I just got overwhelmed.
You can, I mean, the amount of material now is finite because Brian Jakes died in 2006. You can start at the very, very start of the series, as in the first book he wrote, which was just called Redwall and was meant to be a standalone novel, but did really well in the 80s. Or you can go back. It's kind of like the Chronicles of Narnia, where the first book written was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but the story actually starts with the magician's nephew. There is a prequel book called Mossflower, which is actually the first book I read in the series, and I'm glad that's the one I read first, because there's a mythical feature in it called Martin the Warrior, who pops up a lot later in the series as a guiding mythical force, and his sword and his armor and the Great Redwall Tapestry are all created in that book and become major parts of the Redwall lore later on. Yeah, Johnny's just mentioned in chat. Yes, Hugh Jackman was indeed great in The Greatest Showman.
So good.
Also, just one little thing that I want to say real fast. Sometimes I have a hard time putting something in words, and I think about the perfect way to put it much later, but then it's not relevant anymore, so I apologize. But one quick little thing that I wanted to say. The big issue with the ending of Eragon was that he made people fall in love just to tear them apart in a tragic ending.
Oh, what a dick move! You're a dick,
Yeah.
Christopher Paolini.
Yeah, he did that to 3 different people.
You're an unoriginal dick, Christopher Paolini.
Well, 3 different groups, pairs, I should say. Yeah.
You're very, very unoriginal dick, Christopher Paolini. Am I going to keep doing this? I'm starting to sound like the unoriginal dick.
He'd probably get along well with Joe Quesada then.
Ah, fuck him.
So yeah, that was just a thing that I wanted to say real fast to really put into context why I hated that ending.
Right.
What a thing to come back on.
Yeah. Do we have anything more to say about this? Because we've kind of gone into Roald Dahl and him being awesome and Redwall being awesome, and yeah, you need to read the Redwall books. Read either Mossflower or just Redwall, Midi, and see if you like it.
Can I say something about
three? Yeah, I was going to say ignore the first 3 pages of any book because it's just description of the forest. It takes him a while to get going, but when he's got going, he's good. Iris?
He was my favorite author when I was a kid, and honestly, my favorite books that he wrote were actually his biographies.
Oh right. What biographies did he write?
First one was Boy, but I forgot the name of the sequel because it's been literally years since I read it. But that one was about his time.
Boy and
after
Going
he was a
Solo
World
were Roald Dahl's 2 autobiographies.
What was that second book called?
Going Solo. It's
Going Solo. Yes,
it's about his exploits in
About
World War II when he was a fighter pilot who kept crashing into the ground and never actually making it to a battle.
Yeah, and then being unable to see, but also sort of falling in love with the nurse that was taking care of him.
Yeah, where he fell in love with her voice and created this face for her because he was blinded by the crash. And when his sight came back, he realized that she wasn't as pretty as he thought and fell out of love with her. It's like, wow!
Falling in love with the voice you hear. That sounds very familiar nowadays.
Yeah, funny enough, it does. We, in fact, had an entire discussion about this last podcast of people falling in love with fandom VAs and voice actors and narrators and things, and then meeting them in real life and going, oh.
I know nothing of that.
Hello, Puss. Oh, hello, baby.
I'll just make some like random Valentine's Day thing, and you'll have like a few comments like, "Oh, sexy voice!" Like, I suddenly do.
I just get people sending me pornographic messages, to be honest.
Oh God.
Yeah, but we talked about that last time, and we're not going to derail back into old territory. Panda? Panda, did you lean on your keyboard? Oh, bless.
Wait, what?
Yeah, her little light flashed up, so I thought she wanted to say something. Apparently, it was the cat. Cat going, no, Panda, you need to be in this podcast more. I'm going to take over and do it for you. And Pusscat has now woken up. Hello. Hello.
It's not to the cat podcast.
I have a lamp over my table, and he's just shaking his head and then stood up and bashed into it. Oh, no, baby.
Poor confused kitty.
Poor little kitty. He's looking at it now like, what the fuck do you do?
How dare you place it there?
He's just like, the fuck is this? I will kill it.
Of course, he now wants to leave just at the time where it was getting to my point of talk. So, we'll go to Iris first. So, Iris, what is your choice for a movie adaptation of a book? Either that you like or despise.
One that I love, and I might get some shit for it. Stardust.
Oh, so go on then. What is the basic plot?
So, the film adaptation diverges a lot from the plot of the original novel by Neil Gaiman. And honestly, I've read the novelization of it. Yeah, I read the novelization of it, and I actually didn't like it as much as I did the movie because of the way that Neil Gaiman like phrased a lot of it. And just like some of the story beats didn't feel as good as they did in the film adaptation. But the basic plot of it is that first we have Dunstan Thorn, who crosses what's known as the Wall into a magical land, and basically he fucks someone, and then a few months later he's got his doorstep baby, and that doorstep baby is our true hero, Tristan Thorn, or Tristan Thorn as he was renamed in the film to avoid people tripping over that R. Then 18 years later, when Tristan, I'm just gonna flip between the two because whatever. I don't care. He falls in love with this girl, Victoria, and she's in the film. It's more apparent that she's kind of a bitch. But in the novel, it's a little less apparent. But she tells him, "Yeah, I'll marry you if you." And eventually, it comes down to get that fallen star, get it for me, I'll marry you. And he goes do that. But then when he gets there, he realizes that the fallen star is a chick.
Kate Blanchett. No, is it Kate? No. The one who was in Romeo and Juliet. Forget her name.
Claire Danes.
That was it.
Yeah, and so basically it's a journey, their journey back, which comes with a lot of headaches. One of them is the fact that there's three witches who want
Michelle Pfeiffer.
That she's one of them, yeah. And they all want the star whose name's Yvain. They want her so they can eat her heart and become immortal. Yeah, that's fun. Yep. And the third wrinkle is that the King of Stormhold, which is a magic kingdom up like on the magic side of the wall, who is like dying and wants to name his successor. So he magically tosses out this amulet, and whoever so holds this amulet, and if they be of Stormhold blood, they will become the next king of Stormhold. And it turns out that amulet magically just yeeting out of the castle is the one that knocked Yvain out of the sky as a star. So yeah, a couple of wrinkles there. To make everything short, because there's a lot of things that go on. They make it back to the wall. But throughout the journey, Tristan figures out that he's not in love with Victoria because she's kind of a shallow bitch, and he's in love with Yvain, who he's been traveling with for, I don't know, I want to timeline this like a couple days to like a week or two.
think it was just over a couple of days. Because, as in most movie romances, it only takes a couple of days to find your life partner, apparently.
I always headcanon it to like at least up to a week. That's just me.
Well, there's like 2 nights. 3 nights, so there's 3 nights across the film.
So basically, there's differences in the adaptations, but what ends up happening is that the witches are no longer a threat. Tristan is actually descended from Stormhold because his magic birth mother was a daughter of the king, and they ruled Stormhold. Now, there's a lot of differences in this ending because in the book, the witches were just like, oh, the star's heart belongs to you because she's in love with you. We're just gonna fuck off. In the movie, there's like this big like final battle confrontation, which was actually pretty cool. Actually, a pretty cool sequence. And also in the novel, Yvain lives forever, and Tristan dies. In the movie, Tristan lives forever because he was given the heart of a star, and they both end up in the stars. That's that's the most basic I could say about the plot before I get into any details, because like the nitty gritty of like both the novel and the movie adaptation is details. And having read the book when I was in high school, I actually much prefer the film. The way Gaiman wrote it, like he was using like some pre-Tolkien English, and I had to reread a lot of passages to figure out what the fuck was going on, because it was really challenging for freshman me.
Gaiman is one of those writers that can definitely get a little bit wordy and a little bit wrapped up in his own head. Like, as much as I like his Sandman comic, it can be quite a bit to digest when the characters start espousing about philosophy. I am curious, though, Iris, you said initially that you might get a little bit of shit for saying that you liked Stardust as a film.
Well, because I'm sure a lot of people love Gaiman and his writing, and I'm saying that I didn't like his writing at all in this book.
Okay, I get it. So you found the movie preferable just because it was in a form that you found a bit easier to understand, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think it had like this sort of like directorial style that told a lot through just the cinematography without like having to say it in like 5 sentences in older language like Gaiman did.
Yeah, because I was just looking it up, and I see that the movie actually did very well, which is pretty good for anything that happens to be an adaptation. It managed to make back its budget and then some, and it reviewed well, and it even ended up winning a Hugo Award, which is a pretty big deal.
And yet, I'm amongst my group of friends, I'm like one of like 2 people who have seen this movie or read this book.
So is there anybody else here who has seen the movie or read the book? Because like Gaiman is a very prolific author. Some of his big stuff, of course, is Sandman, and more recently there was a lot of hubbub made about his series American Gods. But is there anybody here who has read or seen the film of Stardust?
That's a collective no.
Not here. I've heard the name before, but not seen or read. Sorry.
That's going on our movie night list.
See, I hadn't even heard the name before. I cannot recall at all if I saw anything about this film when it was first coming out. And if I had known about it, I probably would have been very excited for it, because this was during a time when I think there was a bit of a dry spell for fantasy and or science fiction in movies.
You've heard like you've seen this movie before, because everyone else
Stardust.
hasn't.
Yeah, of course I've seen it. I'm pretty surprised nobody else has. You need to all watch this movie. It's fucking good.
I am baby.
You are baby, but that does not mean you haven't watched good cinema. Smack. Money will smack.
It's going in our movie night list.
Give me a list.
7 across the ass.
Oh my god, maybe? Wow, that went from 1 to 100 quite quick for you.
I'm scared.
I was gone for a second. What was happening?
I'm
Nothing
just
important.
you're fine, Panda.
One fear.
So one of the cool differences they made from the novel to movie adaptation is that, like, in the original novel, they end up using the magical teleporting candle. Yes, that's a thing, and they end up in the sky. And in the novel, they just get found by lightning collecting pirates, and they're just like, okay, we're just gonna drop you off. Boom. In the movie, it's turned into this like 10 to 15 minute sequence of them staying on the ship and getting character development. And the captain is played by Robert De Niro, and he is like the most gay Robert De Niro has ever been.
Sorry. I was having a mouthful of muffin.
Is it good muffin?
It is lemon and poppy seed muffin that I bought today from Muffin Break. But it was
Is it-
Good muffin.
I never had it.
Is it as fancy as Robert De Niro as Captain Shakespeare in the film?
nothing is that fancy. That is a fucking amazing sequence. The sword fight is where he's dancing about in the cupboard, and they're being invaded, and there's intercutting between him dancing in the cupboard, trying to decide what dress to wear, and
Septimus and his crew.
yeah, Septimus and the crew invading, and it's so well edited, and the denouement is brilliant, where he's been hiding his flamboyance from the rest of his crew and pretending to be this rough, tough, stereotypical pirate. And at the very end, it's unearthed the truth, and they just go, "We knew the whole time, but we just didn't want you to feel awkward, so we kind of let you pretend that we didn't know."
Captain, we always knew you was a whoopsie.
But it was like, oh. And then he spent the rest of the film being very open about it. It was like, yay, acceptance in a 2007 film.
Don't you just love it when fantasy stories come up for their own names for gays and lesbians?
Yep. It's like, I love the fact that it's because they literally couldn't get it past the censors, so they make up whatever because the audience knows, but the censors will then go, well, yeah, I guess we don't have a rule about that word.
I'm pretty sure that we have our own words for that in the fandom as well.
Philly Fooler.
I was about to say.
Cult cuddler. Philly Fooler is one, but cult cuddler? Really?
I have never heard that.
That was the male equivalent. It came about purely because Philly Fooler was a thing. And Philly Fooler is based on an actual real world one, but cult cuddler was just, well, we need alliteration then, don't we?
Cult cuddler just sounds like a slumber party in a cult.
See, Philly Fooler and cult cuddler, I've never liked as terms because they sound pedophilic.
Actually,
God, they always
they
do.
actually do not think
Alliteration
about it.
does not equal good.
Yeah. Like, they're really prevalent, but every time I hear it, it's like I think I actually wrote that into Playing With My Heart. At one point, Vinyl is coming out because she's in love with Octavia. And her manager calls her a Philly Fooler, and she sort of turns to him and says, "Did you just call me a paedophile? Because that's what that means." And I was like, I don't think the fandom really gets that Philly and cult literally mean children.
FYI, that was one of the most fun scenes for me to read when I was doing that.
I've forgotten that you did the reading of that. Yes, I remember.
I still have to do the latest chapter, but it's such a honker.
It's a year old now, though. So, and
Yeah.
hopefully people have stopped asking you at this point.
Every once in a while, there's always one.
Really? Even at this stage?
Even at this stage, I still get people asking me, are you going to continue this story? But the thing about it is, they almost always ask as if I'm the one writing it. So I have to say, well, that's dependent on the author, but please don't bother her about it.
None of them listen.
You've become the secretary.
I feel like you're gonna get more now that after this comes out. Just like, where's the thing? Where is it?
Thanks for reminding me. I was wondering.
The thing is about Playing With My Heart, the ending's been written since the first chapter came out. But as I've been releasing each chapter, I've been adding in tons of other stuff. So now the original ending needs a whole extra chapter before it to get to that point. And that's the chapter that's making me go, fuck's sake. So yeah, I'm working on it. I've got to finish Vampireless first. I've got to finish releasing it rather than writing it. It's been written for 3 years.
So from the two people who have actually seen the film, is there anything more you'd like to say about Stardust? Because I think the rest of us here are sort of we're
Go and watch
prepared. Oh, okay.
We're gonna gather you all, and we're all gonna watch it because I have this on DVD, Blu-ray. I've downloaded it onto my computer.
It's such a good film. It really is.
What? No laser disc?
Night.
Do you have it on a floppy disk?
Oh shit!
I have it on 8-track. I have it on vinyl.
And Vinyl Pony standing there like, why is there a DVD on my back?
I'm just imagining a lot of us like tied up together, and is like, it's movie night, and all of us who are tied up are just like, yay!
No, if it's movie night, the ones who are tied up are rotated around because depending on who hasn't seen what.
Yeah, it's just a room filled with screens.
Scribbler will be the one tied up when it's the movie she hasn't seen. All of y'all will be tied up except Scribbler when we do Stardust.
It's like, oh boy, it's movie night.
Do we at least get popcorn?
Why the ropes?
I mean, you can have popcorn, but you'll be tied up, so you'd have to like bury your face in the bucket.
That's fine.
No. I
That's
imagine having like horse feed bags for them with popcorn.
That's even better.
That's how I usually eat popcorn. Just mush my head into it.
The whole comment about floppy disks now just makes me think of that magical time in the late 80s and early 90s in cartoons and movies where a floppy disk could save or destroy the world.
That was Independence Day, wasn't it?
Independence Day, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Wait, what?
Yeah, there were a ton of like cartoons and movies that just used floppy disks as like the thing that held either the saving of the world or had like a virus on it that could destroy it or whatever. It was very surreal, especially if you knew exactly what floppy disks were capable of or not capable of.
Yeah, very little. I couldn't even fit an entire fanfiction on one when I was writing.
I'm pretty sure Sonic Sat AM used them several times as well throughout that series too.
I don't think they called them floppy disks though, did they? Especially since they had
No.
Nicole, who was a sentient computer, implying they were a little bit ahead of floppy disks.
And yet they still used floppy disks for storage.
Yeah.
Now I'm just wondering how many of the audience actually know what a floppy disk is.
We are old. Panda, do you know what one of these is?
I found one in my grandpa's drawer the other day when I was doing
fuck
genealogy. He has a dinosaur computer.
Oh no.
You're
That's
not
the
a
only
cute
reason he
Babu
has it. His
anymore.
computer is an actual dinosaur.
So weird.
And he's like,
apparently.
oh, those are my taxes. It's just like, Grandpa, why are they in this drawer?
So I've got to ask, was the floppy disk 3.5 inches or was it the 5-inch actually floppy ones?
They were rainbow.
Or did you actually bother to measure it like that?
Could you fit it in the palm of your hand, or was it too big?
You could fit in the palm of your hand.
Right, it wasn't the original ones. Although, interestingly, you Merkins in the chat, why are your nuclear codes still kept on big-ass 5-inch floppy disks?
Because we're dumb.
Yeah, that's basically the long and short of it. I mean, we had this huge crash at the IRS a couple of years ago because it was still running on the same technology as it had been in the 1950s. And so they had to call in a bunch of retired programmers from that time to actually fix it so that people could actually send in their taxes on time.
Shit! The fuck? I mean, Britain's not great, but we're not using tech from the 50s. Just apparently
It's because-
values sometimes.
It's because they want to preserve the past.
I will point out that America has less past than the rest of the world. And a lot of it shouldn't be preserved.
It's because we fucking dumb.
The future is in the past. Onward, Deoshima.
Who could steal that shit? Like, who could steal like the nuclear codes from a floppy disk and then make use of it in this day and age?
Well, you know what the worrying thing is? All they'd have to do is cut the disk in half. And there we go. America's nuclear arsenal. Gone. Shit, I think I just gave Al-Qaeda some ideas.
Oh no.
I mean,
Don't worry,
Naruto running into
it'll
these
end up like
dudes.
this Area 51 runners.
Good lord. They can't stop all of us.
I love that. We can't
We're
stop all of
immune
us.
to their
You're
bullets if
running
we
towards
Naruto
you.
run.
God damn it.
Have you seen the pictures
No?
of the army guys actually giving a dissertation on Naruto running? Apparently the military had to take the threat of an invasion on Area 51 seriously. So a bunch of soldiers actually had to go to Area 51 and listen to presentations about all of this shit that they were seeing online and on Reddit about people trying to storm Area 51. This included getting briefed on people like
Oh,
Chads,
dear God.
Karens, furries, and Naruto runners.
See,
I feel so sorry for all of them on behalf of the internet.
well, I was on the Awkward podcast with Keyframe and AMY Pony a while ago, and they had to explain to me. Yes, I saw you in the comments. They had to
Stop
explain
that.
to me, and I just love the idea of somebody having to explain to Trump what a Naruto run is, and Trump trying it in the White House. But the best visual is of him running as fast as he can down the hallway, Naruto running, and his security guards are like slowly walking next to him as he's at top speed.
Pretty sure he did.
Yeah, I was gonna say waddling down the hallways.
Yeah, running is not exactly in the cards for Senior Bone Spurs here.
Naruto running is the greatest thing ever introduced to this country.
Shit, that's a good impression.
What if his youngest child, because his youngest child's like 10 or 11 or something like that,
Baron, yes.
how to teach him what Naruto running is, so they're both just running around the White House.
That would mean having to acknowledge that the fat orange turd is his dad.
True.
Should we get on to my choice for movie adaptations of books now?
Yeah, I believe we have a book.
Yep, please, you have been building this thing up
It's not
since the
building it
start
up.
of this podcast.
I'm not building it up.
You've
It's
been
just
foreshadowing it like hell.
Okay, foreshadowing.
You've
maybe.
been building it up.
It's not building it up so much as it just seemed very relevant when we were talking about that stuff, and especially when we were talking about movie remakes. I was quite worried this was going to come up because the book into movie adaptation I had chosen originally. I did want to talk about The Secret of Nim, but that scared me as a child, so I'd rather not dip into that well of awesomeness and revisit those childhood traumas again. And besides which, I think there's a much more interesting story behind my actual choice, which is the Black Cauldron.
Oh,
Oh
the
shit!
skeleton Disney movie.
Yes.
Now, the Black Cauldron has such an interesting production history behind it. I'd say that the production history around this film is much more interesting than the film itself, because it was a really unfortunate film that could have been something great. It's based on a book. I've gone full Liverpool. What the hell was that, Panda? Did they hide a dick in it? What?
They did in the Little Mermaid.
Right, in the Little Mermaid poster,
they had
yes.
2 dicks in the Little Mermaid. There was one on the cover before they had to redraw it, and then there was one on the priest before they had to reanimate it.
Yeah, apparently that was meant to be his knees, but it looked really bad. But that was a weird thing to suddenly have pop up on the screen as you have a message. Did they put a dick in it? Fuck, what? Are you asking if they put a dick in the Black Cauldron?
I mean, sex is in The Lion King, so like I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, angry animators.
Maybe it was one of the key ingredients.
No, that was a special effects, I think.
So, Black Cauldron, famously one of Disney's biggest ever flops, but it was originally... What that Midori skim milk sticky dick in it? Can we stop talking about dicks while I'm trying to talk about literature?
Cena isn't even here.
To be fair, we kind of were even more corrupt than Xena last time. Black Cauldron. It's based on a series of fantasy books called by a guy called Lloyd Alexander called The Chronicles of Prydain, which is based on Welsh folklore, which is why all of the characters' names are a bit odd. And it's based on real-life myths and legends from Wales. And it's a beautiful series of books. They're incredibly well written, but they're very, very dense because they're based on hundreds of years of myths. And it's a series, not a single book. The Black Cauldron is actually the second book in the series. Now, when Disney got the option, they optioned the rights for this in, I think it was 1971. And in this series, it's high fantasy, following several different characters, but focusing mainly on one main character called Taran, and his rise and fall to the role of leader, to downtrodden soldier, to king, to wise old mentor. And it's his whole life story across several series. But Disney was not a fan of sequels at that point. I mean, that changed. They did not do sequels. So they were only ever going to do one self-contained film. But they optioned it in 1971. They didn't really start thinking about it until 1979. And they didn't even start work on it until 1980 for it to come out in 1985. Unfortunately, it was in production when the hierarchy of Disney executives was in flux, major flux. Disney had been in decline for a while, and they wanted to try and do something that there was this generation's Snow White. It was a big show, like a big demonstration of what the studio could do with its new influx of talent after the old animators had retired, and a whole bunch of new Cal Arts animators had come to the studio, including Don Bluth, John Lasseter, and Tim Burton. All three of them worked on the Black Cauldron at various stages. But it was kind of doomed from the start because of how they tried to do this. They wanted to make it much darker as a direct retaliation against Don Bluth when he left the studio and made The Secret of NIMH. And when he made The Secret of NIMH, it was really dark, but really popular children's entertainment. And Disney went, we've got that cauldron thing on the back burner. Let's make that. And unfortunately, like I've got an article in front of me from Slate.com that I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs from because this puts it into it typifies it a bit better than I could. Here we go. Like the accursed kettle from which it takes its title, the Black Cauldron's history is full of conflict. Disney optioned Alexander's 5-volume series in 1971, and throughout the decade used the material to recruit prospective animators to the company. It was viewed as the Snow White of a new generation of animators, a masterpiece in the making that would launch their careers and live forever as an animation classic. But studio chief Ron Miller, Walt Disney's son-in-law who had taken over after Walt's death, worried that his young team wasn't yet ready to tackle the cauldron and kept delaying production. In 1979, frustrated star animator Don Bluth quit and took 13 colleagues with him. In the wake of his departure, the department was staffed by a few old guard and a passel of untested recent CalArt grads, including John Lasseter and Tim Burton. Disney finally decided to push ahead with The Black Cauldron in 1981, spurred by reports of Bluth's first picture away from the mouse, The Secret of NIMH. With Cauldron, Disney hoped to draw teenagers bored of Disney fare like That Darn Cat back into the fold. No respectable teenager would be caught dead watching a Disney movie, Cauldron's producer Joe Hale had said at the time. Employees used to joke that if Disney ever made a World War II movie, they'd probably call it That Darn Hitler. Wow, that joke aged poorly. The Black Cauldron would change all that. In an era of Dungeons and Dragons and the face-melting action of Raiders of the Lost Ark, a darker swords and sorcery epic seemed like a gamble worth taking. Hale plucked one of the series' minor villains, the Horned King, to be the big bad of his movie, and he made the film's action centerpiece the gruesome transformation of dead warriors into the zombie-like Cauldron Born. Cauldron was meant to be a grand, generation-defining work of animation. It was the first Disney feature filmed in 70mm widescreen since Sleeping Beauty. It boasted a 6-track Dolby sound and the first computer animation ever in a Disney film. The company even planned for the Cauldron-born sequence to include a special holographic sequence that would bring the deathless swordsman into the theatre. But over the 5 years it took to produce, the project's scale overwhelmed the depleted animation department. Lovely new widescreen layout charts created for the movie's 70mm format didn't match the ones used in Sleeping Beauty, and animator Michael Berezzara remembers that he only noticed the discrepancy after everyone had been drawing scenes in the wrong dimension for weeks. The holographic sequence was scrapped when creating a system that could work with standard projectors was too costly, and a 10-week animator strike in 1982 put the project even further behind. By the rushed final stages, things were so dire that anyone who could hold a brush was given lessons in cell paintings and set to work. So this is already working at a disadvantage for a very dense storyline from the books. And they brought it down to Taran has a pig that tells the future. The pig gets stolen by the Horned King, who wants it to tell her where the Black Cauldron is, because that can bring zombies back to life to make his army. Taran gets the pig back. The end. And that was the film's plot. Which, when you think of any myths and legends of an entire country, that's a bit thin. Then in the fall of 1984, just months away from Cauldron's planned holiday release, Miller was deposed as the chairman of the company, replaced by Michael Eisner, who you might have heard in relation to the Disney Renaissance. He's the guy behind all the big Disney films.
And also the person who mandated all of those terrible direct-to-video sequels.
Yep. I mean, he was very much a double-edged sword, Eisner. He propelled Disney into new heights and also plummeted it into new depths.
Well, it was mostly because during that point in time, he didn't really have anybody keeping him in check. By the time he started rolling out those sequels, that was also after he had Katzenberg ousted from the company and created what was, at the time, Disney's biggest threat in DreamWorks Animation.
Yeah, kind of like in The Last Unicorn, he created his own demise. But in this case, 1984, he'd just been brought in, along with Jeffrey Katzenberg. So neither Eisner nor Eisner handpicked Jeffrey Katzenberg to chair the animation studio. It's like he literally picked his enemy. In fact, they discussed eliminating the animation division entirely because it was too costly. Katzenberg, from the first, hated the Black Cauldron and wanted to re-edit it with different footage. And Hale, the director, had to explain that in animation, unlike live-action movies, which Katzenberg had always overseen for his whole career, there's no such thing as an outtake. So Katzenberg told Hale to cut 10 minutes from it. And when Hale said, no, the plot needs those 10 minutes, Katzenberg marched into the editing room himself, picked up the film footage, and started cutting it with scissors. And most of the Cauldron-born sequence, which was the darkest bit, which involved, like, soldiers being melted, that you can still see some of the storyboards and some of the cell footage of these people being thrown into the cauldron and melting and turning into skeleton warriors in a Disney film. It was really dark, really impressive. They cut it all, and there's no way to get it back because Katzenberg shredded it with a pair of scissors. The cuts were so clumsy that at one point an entire symbol flourish is interrupted mid-crash because Katzenberg cut it with a pair of scissors. Now,
are you actually for real?
No, this is real. I did a lot of research for this because, like, I watched a video on YouTube about this last year and was really fascinated by the story of the Black Cauldron and how it got. Because I've always loved the film, but I kind of wished it was darker and had more to it. Those dark sequences are what I liked the best. And then I heard that there originally was more, and I went researching. So it's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this, is because I went and read the Black Cauldron book, and it's nothing like the film. It's a tiny, tiny thing. It's an in-name only adaptation, and it didn't have to be, because when Disney optioned the book series, the author thought they were adapting the book itself. And when he saw the film, because he only saw the final version, apparently he was disgusted with what they'd done. He hated the Disney version. Like, there were so many changes they'd made to the story, things they'd missed out. They'd elevated the Horned King. I mean, John Hurt was the Horned King, and he does a phenomenal job with what he's given, but what he's given is shit.
Yeah, the Horned King has almost nothing to do in the entirety of the movie itself. He's Orcus on his throne, basically. He just sits there and lets the plot happen around him for a majority of it. I love his design as a villain, but he doesn't really do anything. And the reason for that is, in the book, he wasn't the big bad. He was actually the henchman of a far worse king, who was the big bad. But for some reason, the name the Horned King really appealed to the original production team, and they elevated him, which makes no sense. Yep. At most, I would say the movie takes some elements from the first and second book in the series, but other than that, it's pretty much all, like, pieced together and fabricated into its own original story. Unfortunately, that means that you end up with, like, plot holes and problems, and the only Disney princess who has never been a part of the Disney princess lineup, ever. There are only 3 Disney princesses who have never been part of the official lineup. 2 of them are Anna and Elsa from Frozen, and that's just because they have their own line of products, and the other is Eilonwy from the Black Cauldron. Also, some of the princesses aren't actually princesses. Exactly, Eilonwy actually is one! Also, she is voiced by a Doctor Who companion. Ace, from the 1980s Doctor Who, voices Eilonwy. Wait, Ace plays her? Yes, the actress. I did not know that. That's awesome. Yeah, it's a lot of the cast were actually English. I don't know why they decided, because it's a Welsh story, and the character names are Welsh. I mean, yeah, it's
Flam.
Europe. Who cares?
Fuck you, America. Fluda Flam. There's not a more Welsh name than Fluda Flam. I mean, it's got 4 F's in it. But yeah. So, yeah. This film, I love this film. But unfortunately, it was always going to fail because of production problems. That when they released it, do you know what beat it in the box office during its release? Because it was only in theatres for 4 weeks, and then they put it into the vault until 1998, when they released it on video, and then 2010 when they released it on a shitty DVD. And they did clean up the film for the DVD, but the version that you can get on Amazon is the original cut, which has all sorts of cells missing and problems. And do you know what beat it at the box office?
What?
A re-release of E.T., Back to the Future, which had been released a month earlier, and the Care Bears movie 2.
You gotta be kidding me.
Nope.
Oh my god.
The Care Bears movie 2 beat the Black Cauldron and lasted in the cinema longer than it as well. 4 weeks Disney left it there and then went, fuck this, nope. The only film critic who liked it unabashedly was Roger Ebert. Every other film critic shredded it completely. And unfortunately, that film literally changed the face of Disney animation entirely because it was such a flop that Katzenberg and Eisner took that as a reason to move the animation department from this nice office block in Burbank to a warehouse on the other side of, Burbank is in California, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah, on the other side of California. So they were in a warehouse somewhere that was horrible, apparently, and it made everything really cheap. And that Katzenberg, when he did some research into how animation works, and he saw the flop of the Black Cauldron, which the Black Cauldron had always used an old-fashioned idea of storyboarding a film before scripting it. So the animation took precedence over the script and the story, which works when you've got a fairy tale, but not when you've got a really dense book like the Chronicles of Prydain, which was the original book the Black Cauldron is based on. Books, sorry. He decided, right, we need to foreground the story, dial back on the amount of money we're spending on animation, and pay everybody less to do more. And you know what came out of that bore him out as being correct? Quote, quote, The Little Mermaid.
The start of the Disney Renaissance.
Yep, the start of the Disney Renaissance came out of Katzenberg scaling everything back and effectively steamrollering the animation department to not put animation first, which is how they started going full ham into the storyline, the songs, animation second, and then into star power. Because he thought, right, if we get a star into voice things, then the animation we can spend even less on because people will go and see the star. It doesn't matter how good the animation is. Then we've got Aladdin. So, unfortunately, the Black Cauldron caused a major upset on every aspect of Disney because Disney's animation studio very nearly went under at that point. And it's unfortunate because it could have been so good. And when we were talking about Disney remakes earlier, this is the one I want to see as a Disney remake. I want to see what they could actually do with the original story. And I think it is one of those films that could be done well in live action better than animation, to be honest. So I have waffled a lot. Sorry, Goombasa, you want to take over?
It's kind of one of those things where you see all of these big book series getting made into movies. You had Harry Potter and Twilight and Hunger Games. I think they tried it with mixed results with things like Percy Jackson and whatnot. And I'm kind of surprised that nobody tried to do it with the Chronicles of Prydain before Disney got the rights to the film, quite honestly.
Well, at that point, that was coming on the heels of the Rankin Bass Lord of the Rings failure. So maybe they were all a bit gun-shy.
Probably. Oh, here's a bit of a fun fact, too, that I just found out while looking into the Black Cauldron, because I wanted to sort of follow along with the article that you were reading. Apparently, they had tried their best to make the film a success by marketing it a little bit heavily at their theme parks. They actually opened up a restaurant in Disney World leading up to its release called Gurgi's Crunchies and Munchies. But as soon as the film flopped, they closed it down and remodeled it into a Beauty and the Beast style eatery.
Is that still
there? And then
a few years...
Well, it's still there, but they've since remodeled it into one based around Robin Hood. Which is another Disney film that they don't seem to want to acknowledge that much.
It's a shame, because that was such a good film.
It was, yes.
Even if they did reuse a lot of Jungle Book footage.
Jungle Book and the Aristocats, too. There's a lot reused from that.
That was it, yes. Without the racist cat. So I waxed up very lyrical on this one. Does Panda, I see that you've made a mark. What do you want to say?
I've been low-key seething at the fact that this son of a bitch had the audacity to cut up so much work with a pair of fucking scissors, and I want to go punch him in the face.
That's Katzenberg for you. Just look into some of the stuff that Katzenberg has pulled over the years. Like Shrek. The entire success of Shrek was him giving the middle finger to Disney.
And need we say anything about the whole Ants versus A Bug's Life situation, where there are a lot of people saying a lot of different things, but a lot of evidence points to him stealing the idea from Disney as they were entering pre-production for that, or Pixar as they were entering pre-production for that, and then using it to make a more adult-oriented movie based around ants.
I mean, to be fair, DreamWorks' Ants is really funny. It hasn't aged as well as A Bug's Life, though.
Very true, yes.
It started that whole thing of pop culture references that culminated horribly in Shark Tale.
DreamWorks was also the ones that really heavily pushed the idea of getting more star power for animated movies. Well, Disney might have started it, but it was DreamWorks that codified it with the fact that they got God. I know that they had a bunch of big names in Ants, for example. Ants and Shrek.
Woody Allen was the main character.
Yep, Woody Allen. What was the name of the?
We have a story.
Why can I never remember his name?
Who did he play?
It was Cutter, the assistant to the villain. He always talks like this. Christopher Walken. That's it. Thank you. Okay.
I just found the Ants cast and crew.
Yeah.
Ditto.
Yeah, they had a lot. They had Dan Aykroyd, Anne Bancroft, Jane Curtin, Danny Glover, Gene Hackman, Jennifer Lopez, John Mahoney, Paul Mazursky, Grant Shaw, Sylvester Stallone, Sharon Stone, Christopher Walken, Jim Cummings, Jerry Stroker, and April Winchell. April Winchell being Miss Finster.
Wait, Sylvester goddamn Stallone was in Ants?
Yeah,
he was the big
soldier ants. Yeah.
And a lot of those big names in there were also people who played, like, characters that had 2 or 3 lines.
Yep.
Like, yeah.
Ants. I mean, didn't Donald Glover's character appears in one scene and is dead by the next one, isn't he? Yeah, he's a talking head, and like he's had his head cut off, and Woody Allen has to pick him up and go, "How am I looking? I can't feel my legs. You're looking great. You're looking a bit pale though." Ants wasn't a bad film, but it was made in a spirit of mean-spiritedness, which is a shame.
I loved it, and my dad and I still quote it to this day.
Hi, Starry.
By the
Hi,
way,
Starry.
Starry has entered the podcast.
Hi, Starry.
This
It's
is the
a
podcast
bean.
of the latecomers because Iris joined us late as well.
I remember seeing you guys talking about the time. I'm like, everyone's gonna be asleep. I don't think they're gonna appreciate it. And then they're off saying goodbye to Americans at the airport, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can do it because
You sound asleep yourself. Are you okay?
I'm fine. I got coffee in the fridge. Oh, I have coffee in the fridge. You're back.
So, I have coffee in the fridge. Oh, I have coffee in the fridge. So yeah. Does anybody want to say?
The sun is up.
When Starry gets back, Starry, we're talking the Black Cauldron. If you can hear that. If not, we'll tell you in a second. Does anybody else have anything to say about the Black Cauldron?
Read the books. You really should. They are really good. It was one of my favorite fantasy series when I was growing up. And ironically, I started reading it because I had seen a VHS of the Black Cauldron, and I really liked that film, despite knowing that the books, being 5 volumes long, was probably going to be really different than the movie.
But that was always the thing. Peter Pan, the movie, is quite different than the original stage play and thus book.
Which movie?
Yeah. Well, just to clue you in, we've done it. I was the last one to go on this, but we're talking about the Black Cauldron adaptation. Have you seen the Disney film, Starry?
I actually have, because a couple of years ago when I was staying with my friends in Melbourne, they had this. I remember they had a hard drive of like a bunch of Disney films and TV series, and I was just like adding it to my hard drive just because they had such a database. And one time I was bored and going through the hard drive, and I was like, oh, I've never seen this film. Let's watch it. And I was just like, huh. Because I remember hearing about Illinois, I think her name is. the forgotten Disney princess, and I was curious about how dark it supposedly was and everything. So,
Well, we were just saying that the original version, before Jeffrey Katzenberg literally cut it up with a pair of scissors, was even darker. It involved literal, deaths of soldiers being melted, and there was actually a scene where Princess Ailonwi, who is at the very least, an early teenager, if not a preteen, there is a scene where her dress gets torn up the middle and she is harassed by a couple of men for showing her underwear.
of course she is. Why wouldn't she be?
Well, this is Disney trying to be more mature and adult as a reaction to The Secret of NIMH.
Yeah.
But why couldn't they cut the underwear scene and not the good scene?
Well, thankfully,
She's
the idea of the
right?
Ailonwi scene was never fully animated. It was just storyboarded. So there is no... That was cut pretty early on. But that was in the original treatment.
I was like, I don't remember that. Was this fanfic? That's what I was thinking when you said that.
Well, there are some... Because Katzenberg did that, and because Eisner came in and was like, it's not good, we're going to have to cut some of it. The animators were all very sad, and they redid bits of footage, which is why the first 10 minutes of the film is completely remade footage from the original, with a couple of months to go before release. And if you watch the Amazon download, it's the original version with all of its problems. There are bits where cells bleed into each other. There are missing cells. Sometimes the lip sync isn't there. It looks shoddier than the rest. Rewatching, and just that first 10 minutes was brand new footage. And across the whole film, there were 12 minutes removed by Katzenberg. Whether when he marched into the room or just because he asked them to take out scenes. But this was Disney's first attempt at building up a romance between two characters that wasn't just, here is a princess, this is a prince, hey look, they're in love. Where Ailonwi and Taran were meant to snark and grow to know each other and believe that they actually were starting to fall for each other but were not fully in love by the end. And Katzenberg cut the whole romance. But there is a scene in there where I think she's sewing up her dress or something, and they're talking by a river and about what they're going to do next. And she and Taran have a fight, and he calls her a stupid girl, and she gets upset and walks away, and it seems like a complete overreaction to what he's saying. But it's because the middle part of that scene is gone, where you got the feeling that she kind of likes Taran, and then when he's mean to her, he hurts her feelings. But instead it just looks like she's overreacting and crying behind a tree.
Was it that whole kindergarten cliche, pulling girls' hair and stuff? But
well, see, that would involve Taran being a proper character. He is just a whiny brat all the way through.
That is very true. That is very true. I did notice that they were building him up to be the hero, and I'm just like, this kid is complaining a lot.
Well, one of the reasons they changed his character was based on Luke Skywalker. Because they wanted him to be more like Luke Skywalker, because that was popular. Except that Luke Skywalker, his family, is killed because he was off trying to find his droids and finding out about his father and lightsabers and things.
That's the only reason he wasn't killed.
Exactly, but he at the very least, his whining is because he wants to do more than just sit around and let the bad things happen. Whereas Taran, it's all about wanting people to see him as a hero. And Hedwig the pig, the one thing he was meant to keep safe, he loses after 2 minutes because he was daydreaming about people loading him as a hero. That is not Luke Skywalker-ish. That is just a bratty teenage boy. And it's hard to get behind him. Exactly, it's just being a dick. And it's a shame, because Taran in the books, Goombasa can back me up on this, is not like that. Is he, Goombasa?
No, he is not. He might start out a little bit immature, but he is not bratty or whiny. He's very cocksure of himself. Let's put it that way. Very egotistical. Hasn't seen a lot of the world. And I mean, the entire fourth book is just about Taran and Gurgi traveling around the continent and meeting people, and it's really fascinating because you see a lot of development. There's a lot of development in the first 3 books, but the fourth book is pretty much entirely about his character development.
Right. I'm aware that we're at 2 hours 37 minutes of recording just the podcast.
Oh, you are you?
We are, yes.
Feels like minutes.
It's funny that. It's just whizzed by for you. On that note, then, do we have anything else to say about the Black Cauldron before we let Starry have her turn. Iris, I heard your intake of breath there.
It's gonna be a little mean, but Disney's gonna make a remake of Black Cauldron as soon as they make the remake of my pipe dream Treasure Planet.
See, they are actually talking about remaking Treasure Planet, though. It's not been
What
picked.
about Atlantis?
That one they haven't been talking about.
That one too. Like,
Yeah.
seriously, I was in a Discord call with some other friends. Like, what should Disney remake that they should remake? And we're like, Treasure Planet and Atlantis. That's it. Then we just wax lyrical about who would like play each character.
Atlantis would look really cool in the latest.
They have been talking about those two, but there was one film that came out and bombed that made them a little less sure of themselves in that, and I forget what it's called. Something about 1,000 planets.
Is it Lion King?
No, it was a different studio's film.
Beauty and the Beast?
No. It was a different studio. Something about an adventure on 1,000 worlds or 1,000 planets. Rihanna was in it for about 5 minutes.
Sounds familiar. I just can't put the name on it.
Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets. And that one did so poorly that Disney has just gone, space operas, maybe not. We'll stick with Guardians of the Galaxy for that. You know, where they can keep hold of a fucking director.
See, they'll remake Treasure Planet just as soon as they make Maid Marian into one of the Disney princesses, so, you know.
Yeah, but they've got this weird thing about not putting non-human characters into the Disney lineup.
Yeah, fairy princess.
Exactly, it would be
Why would you do
a
that?
fairy princess, and Disney's like, yeah, we're not going to go down that road.
That's why Judy wasn't accepted either.
Yeah, it's why Judy and the... Are they making a Zootopia too?
I haven't heard anything about it.
Well, I've only ever heard rumours, but it was so fucking successful, I'd be really surprised if they don't. They're making Frozen 2, and Zootopia was just as popular.
It could be in the works.
In my
That
opinion,
could be with the rumor.
I want more of that
necessarily need a
universe.
sequel.
No, wait, they have confirmed that a Zootopia sequel is confirmed. It was confirmed in 2017 at the Golden Globe Awards, but no information has come out about it since.
It's going to be about interspecies relationships.
Is it?
I don't know. I don't know.
I would like that. I would like the fox and the predator and the prey to fall in love.
I think there was a comic about that became a big
No,
meme a while ago.
no.
There has been a lot.
No,
We're not
please
talking
no.
about
Please
that.
no.
There's been a couple.
Sorry, no.
I feel
We
like I
will
should
end
know
that.
about this.
We'll end that subject right here. Just right here. It's done.
I'm sorry, I had to bring it up though.
Moving
When
on.
You mentioned that.
Moving on. Right, Starry, what is your book to movie adaptation that you want to talk about? The one that you've forgotten while you were
well-
asleep.
Yeah, I think I had one, but I also don't know if you guys have talked about what.
Okay,
what
what
books you
that,
talked.
thus far, we'll run through the list
Mm.
and just let everybody say the one they've talked about. So, Goombasa, what was yours?
The Last Unicorn?
Panda?
The Host.
Johnny?
The Little Mermaid.
Midori?
The Fantastic Mr. Fox with a hint of Eragon.
And Iris?
Stardust.
And mine was the Black Cauldron. So, any of those, Starry?
I'm sorry, like when I heard the Little Mermaid, I'm like, ooh, because that is very different from the books.
We got into that.
Oh yeah, we got into
I
that.
bet. Because like I had two versions of that book too, like a happy ending and a very, very sad ending to that. So, well, I mean I could talk about Watership Down, but I think I've done that before. So
Yeah,
what
the
about-
very first podcast, we whacked for
Yeah.
about half an hour on Watership Down.
Yeah, I think I've done and dusted that one. Don't Hate Me, Twilight, maybe.
Okay. Is this because it's a good adaptation or a bad adaptation?
Well, I think like the way that when I first read the books, maybe I enjoyed it a lot because I could insert myself into Bella a little bit more. Like there weren't when I was growing up, there weren't too many in my growing up circle of movies and books and stuff. There weren't many brunettes with brown eyes and stuff, so it was all blondes because you know Disney promoted the blonde princesses more than Belle, and so
Yeah.
I think maybe that was something I enjoyed because I was like, oh cool, and I mean my musical theater teacher has this whole rant on it on the first book, but I remember seeing it in the film in the theater, and I was like, this was after all the hype and everything, so there weren't. I
So
don't
you
think there were
weren't,
too many
like,
people.
Riding on the wave of what everybody else thought.
No, I remember like literally in my musical theater class, because it was so popular, did a themed thing based on it. You could choose vampires or whatever, and the other group chose the vampires that was closely based to Twilight, and we just did werewolves and werewolves, because we didn't know anything about it. That's how much I didn't know. I remember like thinking that the whole camera angle was dark and like not in a, oh boy, this is exciting, just in a, where are the bright colors? It's dull coloring. Second one was better because the colors were a little bit more vibrant, but the first one was very dull in color. I don't know if that works or not. I'm put on the spot, and my throat is almost going.
Oh, bless. So, does anybody else have anything to say about Twilight as an adaptation?
As an adaptation, it's okay, because they simplify some things that would have been too lengthy, would have killed the pace that works in books, but not in the film. But they also glossed over some scenes that really needed to be fleshed out, but then were just sort of like glossed over with like one line or two that I felt that should be fleshed out. But as an adaptation, it's not the best, but there have been much worse, and that's all I'm going to say on the subject of it as an adaptation.
That was the only thing that could come to mind. I'm so sorry.
Goombasa?
Yeah, I'd say it's an okay adaptation. I've only read the first Twilight book because this was right before the series really kicked off, and I was actually kind of curious about it. I don't like the book, and I don't like the movie, but I will say that it doesn't really work as a film. Like, again, as an adaptation, it's okay, but as a film taken on its own, without any relation to the book, it just doesn't really work that well. Like, the acting and the characters don't really work. The cinematography is disorienting more often than not, which can be very effective if that's the mood that you're going for, but I don't really think that's what they were going for in that movie. And that sort of applies for the entire series of movies, in my opinion. Yeah, I don't think it works very well as a film series the same way that Harry Potter did. And I'm kind of convinced that the only reason that they made films of Twilight, despite the book's popularity, was the fact that the Harry Potter series at the time was such a big success.
Yep. There were a lot of films that came out around that time that, like the, oh gosh, what's the Rick Riordan thing? Sorry, what was that?
Percy Jackson.
That was it. The Percy Jackson books. They attempted it with that as well, and aged up all the characters from 12 to teenagers.
Which got one movie, I believe.
Two movies.
We don't talk about that second one because it was so unbelievably bad. But there were two of them.
It was even starting to bleed over into books that were sort of innocuous. I don't know how many of you remember this, but there was a book called Blood and Chocolate that was released.
Oh, yes, I remember that one.
Yeah. I fucking loved that book, and that film was so unbelievably shit.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, it was so incredibly removed from the book. And, like, I remember being really surprised that it even got an adaptation, because it was a single standalone book. And I'm convinced that much like how the Twilight films only existed because of the Harry Potter films, I think Blood and Chocolate only managed to get an adaptation because of the Twilight films.
The Blood and Chocolate, no joke, when my mum was in hospital when I was 16, I've said this before, that my mum had cancer when I was 16, and I was left alone after my GCSEs in the house for a very long time. And I read a lot. And that book I reread over and over again because it was so damn good. It is such a good book. And the film was nothing to do with it. They bought the title and the name of the main character, and that was it. And I'd suppressed that the film even existed, otherwise I would have chosen that for my pick, because it's so fucking bad that it actively makes me boil inside how bad it is, and how angry I am that there will never be a good adaptation. That and Vampire Academy. They were both good books, shit adaptations. There'll never be another because they fucked it up so badly from studio mandates.
The only reason I know of Blood and Chocolate is because when I was actually into Twilight and stuff, when people were making music videos and stuff, and they ran out of Twilight, they ran out of Twilight video stuff, they started using other films, and Blood and Chocolate was one of them. I can't remember if it was because of the wolves when they were doing New Moon, but it was a popular one, and I was like, I'm gonna check out this film. And it was very weird, but I remember reading a fan fiction with the same kind of storyline, so I was like, oh, that's where they got that from. Ew.
The thing that gets me is that Blood and Chocolate on its own is not a very long book to begin with.
It's like
but
200
it's also
pages.
Yeah, I must be remembering it wrong then, because I remember it being shorter than that, actually.
It's 200 pages, but it is very big script, like big printing.
Yes. It's one of those books that actually does something different with the whole paranormal romance angle, in that the romance goes horribly wrong in that book. And that's kind of what I really liked about it. That the two lovers do not end up together. The fact that the main character is a werewolf is a really big deal that sort of separates the two from each other. And I like that. I think it's one of those situations where the two not ending up together and not getting their happily ever after makes the book much, much stronger because of that.
I agree. And I don't mind spoiling it, because like you want that ending. The book is written in such a way that you want that ending. Starry, do you want to elaborate any more about Twilight? Or does anybody else want to say anything about Twilight?
Kristen Stewart needs to work on her facial expressions. She can't act.
Yeah, that was one of the downsides to watching the film. I will also admit that, which came in handy in New Moon, but like in Twilight, I did get like a graphic novel from the airport in America once, and I was like, this is actually really much better, because like, you know, there were facial, you know, the face did change a bit more, and
because she can emote.
Yep, because she could emote, because it was art. I felt really bad about that, but that's the truth. Also, those contacts did not work for her in that first film. Her eyes just looked black.
I mean, to be fair, when you have purely black eyes, that is kind of scary, but I don't think it was what they were going for.
Not for her. Not for her as a human.
No, as a human, no. See, I avoided all the films for a reason.
Chocolate brown eyes, and they got it. They got better contacts later, but the first one, I think they were working off a cheap budget, to be honest.
I do feel kind of bad for the stigma that sort of followed a few of the actors around after that movie came out, because they were the butt of jokes for years afterwards. Like Kristen Stewart Kristen Stewart, Robert Patterson, they were Bella Swan and Edward Cullen in the movies. And I remember hearing like people just making fun of them endlessly, not the characters, but the actors themselves. Despite the fact that both of them, I think, have really shown that they are really good actors. It was just the movie itself and its production and the direction and the way that they were told to act really did not play well to show them as strong actors.
Like, Rob Pattinson, you know, he was put in Batman recently, and they literally address him as the Twilight actor, and people actually wanted to petition him out of it purely because of Twilight, and I don't think that's fair at all. Like, that is still following them even now. Like, Twilight is done and dusted. It's gone. It's long gone.
It's been gone for a long time, and yet
they've still got that following them. And it's
one of the
really
reasons
hard.
they
It's
keep
kind of
trying to be cast against type, isn't it? It's one of the reasons they said that Kristen Stewart auditioned specifically, campaigned to be in Snow White and the Huntsman because Bella Swan was such a passive character that she wanted to be in an active role. And she ruined that film too.
She probably tried too hard.
No, she couldn't emote. She has one facial expression.
Oh, girl.
She just has constant RBF.
Constant what?
Resting
I thought you said
bitch face.
constipation. Oh, I thought you said constant constipation.
Wait, what?
No,
I mean,
what?
there's
constant
that,
resting bitch
Resting
face.
bitch face.
Oh, right. I thought it was
RBF.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
I thought I couldn't hear her, and I thought she said it looks like she has constipation, which is also true.
Literally.
And also, while I don't have anything to say about Twilight as an adaptation of the book, I do have a couple of things to say about its adaptation of the mythical vampires.
We're gonna avoid that little side story because that's like an entire thing on its own. It's already been like said multiple times.
I know.
At this point, bashing Twilight's like bashing Sword Art Online. People are done already.
Yeah, and this is at least trying to be a podcast about books, so we should stick to it.
Well, on that note, we have been recording for nearly 3 hours, so we should probably try and wrap it up at some point. Because I'm aware that we've stolen 3 hours of somebody's day.
New book, who dis?
What was that? New book, who dis? What?
I don't know.
That was a reference to Dragon Ball Z Kai, wasn't it?
Maybe.
No, the meme is new phone who dis. That's an actual meme.
That is the meme, and for some reason my brain thought it would be it would be very appropriate to say it, and I'm just like, that probably didn't make any sense at all. Today, sorry.
We should probably wrap it up so that she can actually sleep.
Yeah.
I don't want to sleep. I gotta go place. Unless you guys need to sleep, because I don't know what time it is for you guys.
Well, it's becoming 10 p.m. for me, so.
And it's 9 p.m. for me.
It's only 4 over here, but we are getting closer to dinner time.
Yeah, it's 9 p.m. and I still haven't eaten.
Me neither.
Yeah.
I'm still packing my bag while no one's here.
The struggles of a Euro brony.
Right, so if we will wrap it up, and then we can just leave the call recording for supplementary material. Which I've just sent to Starry because last time, there was a lot of Xena making you squeak last time.
I was watching that, and then you were like, "Oh, by the way, a Mumble thing is out." So when I joined it, I was convinced that the video was still rolling, and it took me a little bit for me to actually hear other voices. I'm like, okay, it's a different thing. It's fine. I'm in the right thing.
No, child, no.
No, child,
no.
Xena was making you squeak?
No one does that. I don't squeak at all. There's no proof.
Xena makes her squeak a lot.
We have audio proof that Scribbler was in the process of editing.
Fake news.
I sent it to you, Starry. I've got the evidence.
You can't trust it. It's all edited. It's unreliable.
How does she make her squeak?
I think you
very easily.
Well, okay, there's two different things. One of which we cannot talk about on the call, and the second one is that he talks about things that have happened to her in their D&D campaign, and she just goes.
Didn't this happen in the room at PC?
No. No proof of that.
Okay, let's get into this after
We'll get into this
the
after
episode.
the podcast.
Let's get into that.
So anybody listening, you need to come back next week for the supplementary material to hear us continue to torture Starry a bit. Right.
Oh,
so this has been Babble Scribbler, episode 23, I think this was. I have been Scribbler, your moderator, and I have been joined by, saying goodbye, guys, BlackIrisBalloon.
Goodbye, I still got a paper to write.
Goombasa.
Physical media is forever by Laserdisc.
Itssopanda.
Still an idiot on the internet.
Johnny Furno.
New podcast, who this? Also, hi, bye, thanks for listening.
Midori.
The snozcumbers taste like snozcumbers.
And Starry.
I was actually here the whole time. Totally was.
No one expects the Starry Inquisition.
You thought it was a podcast, but it was her story.
I was a fly on the wall. Totally.
Oh, God. Right, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.